Good evening, everyone. Tonight is April 19th, 2023. I would like to call to order a joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting. We'll be using the hybrid interactive technology format. Our first order of business tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us if you care to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On to number 3. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the meeting agenda for tonight?
So this is Janet. Move to approve the meeting agenda.
This is Ron. I'll second it.
Are there any questions or debate on the issues? If not, I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Lynn, aye.
Janet, aye.
Barb, aye.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Judy, aye.
Thank you. And Jesse, aye. Our next motion needed is the approval of the March 15th, 2023 Joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting. Would someone care to make that motion?
This is Lynn. I'll make the motion to approve.
This is Barb. I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Lynn, aye.
Janet, aye.
Barb, aye.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Judy, aye.
And Jesse, aye. On to number 6, public open forum. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public open forum?
We
Either,
got number 5.
oop, what?
We got to do number 5 on our.
Already crossed off. Okay, would someone like to make the motion to approve the March 15th, 2023 Joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting minutes?
This is Barb. Motion to approve.
That's Ron. I'll second it.
Any other questions or discussions? I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Lynn, aye.
Janet, aye.
Barb, aye.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Judy, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. So now we're on to the public open forum. Anyone online or in the room who would like to speak at public open forum? Seeing none, then we'll move on to number 7. Planning Commission discussion of the preliminary plat and conditional use permit for a planned unit development of the Kettle Cove Estates, pages 1 through 30, and the enclosure in our packets. You were here last week, Madam Chair.
Okay, is there any discussion from the Planning Commission members, since we didn't have discussion after the public hearing, that anybody wanted to discuss?
This is Barb. I noticed at the last meeting that a number of residents came out and they seemed confused to me about the 5-acre limit. And a lot of them didn't know about the lot averaging. So I'm wondering if someone in the staff could maybe explain to people when that happened and why it happened, so that everybody that's here or that's listening could get some information.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm Dean Johnson. I'm a consulting planner for the City of Columbus. I'm not certain exactly what year an amendment in the zoning ordinance may have actually accomplished the lot averaging provision that governs some alternatives for lot sizes within a particular development, but I'd say 10 years at least.
Dean, was it Thornbeck Preserve? Rob, over here.
I don't think that was the first one,
Was what?
but I don't think Thornburg Preserves was the first one we did it, but it was probably in that, in that era that we changed it.
It was prior to that development. That wasn't the reason we amended the ordinance. There was an interest in allowing creativity in lots that might have otherwise been very narrow and very deep lots. The procedure is called a planned unit development. It requires a conditional use permit, and it does not change the average lot size within the development. And I think the biggest misconception by people is that this change resulted in increasing the number of lots that someone may be allowed on a subdivision. That's the furthest from the truth. The only thing this ordinance does is allow flexibility for an average lot of 5 acres to be as low or as small as 2.5, but it's got to be compensated somewhere else by one as large as 7.5, so that the average of the small lots and the large lots is always 5 acres. This property, as I mentioned, and I'm not going to pull my staff report and get the details, but they started out before platting at 37 acres. Actually, I think the property owners will tell you when they first had the property, it was a full 40. But over time, all political jurisdictions, cities, counties, absorb right-of-way for existing roads through a legal process, and they went from 40 acres to 37.5, something like that. So if you take that and divide it by 5, that's 7 lots. A purist could have said, we had 40 at one time, we're entitled to 8 lots. Let's go through that process. They didn't argue that, and so the average lot size here is still greater than 5 acres, if you will, on the basis of what the land was before giving up right-of-way. For all of the neighbors that might be interested, Anoka County frequently in subdivisions of property requires additional right-of-way. And so in this case, the landowner owns on both sides of Kettle River. Did I say Lake Drive a minute ago? If I did, I confuse myself sometimes. We're on Kettle River Boulevard. They own into the center of the road legally by their description, but it's 33 feet of right-of-way on each side. The county, in reviewing this plat, has requested an additional 27 feet on both sides. So we're talking now a very large section of land. One of the other things that we recognized in the planned unit development is that there is an existing dwelling on the property, and because the county has required the additional right-of-way, that home does not meet the setback from the new property line. It's 27 feet closer than it used to be from that county right-of-way. And so we've acknowledged that in our approval process, that they don't have to go out and get a variance. We understand why that situation has occurred. So the planned unit development procedure, first of all, allows us to do lot averaging. Maybe that's an easier way to say it. They were entitled to 7 lots. They have 7 lots, but they have a variety of lot widths and lot sizes, and they average more than the 5 acres. So this, for all intents and purposes, is a conventional subdivision. It's not increasing the density. It's not giving them something someone else could not have. They went through a legal process to accomplish this.
Thank you. I did, just so the rest of the Planning Commission members know, I did reach out to Kaisa, who talked at the meeting, and we talked for like an hour and a half, but we went over some of that, and she says, I know I can't stop this, but how can we make it friendly for everybody? And so in her new letter where she talked about decorative trees along the property line, I mean, there's things we can suggest and ask them to do to make a harmony within the neighbors. I don't think we can rule that you have to, but if you can just have communication with the neighbors and come up with something that everybody can I'm sure we can do it, that everybody is happy with. But it just takes reaching out and talking to people and letting them know that, they are part of our community, so.
I have a question for Dean. So I understand PUD process when it comes to commercial developments. So generally, there's sort of a give and take between the developer and the city. Do we have that same kind of give and take when it's residential? And that's kind of to Lynn's point.
When the waivers are spelled out in the rural residential district, it's limited specifically to a dimensional standard that deals with the lot size. And so the specific language in the PUD provisions for rural residential are pretty succinct, whereas in commercial provisions, when we look at them, someone may want to have a standard that is relaxed regarding a design standard. And we don't have a laundry list of what all of those may be. And that's where we generally make the distinction that if you want us to alter our standards for things we don't specify, we are going to expect some sort of design enhancement in return. That's not the case in the rural residential.
Okay.
It's several paragraphs that are very well laid out. For those in the audience that I didn't specify, you can have as small as 2.5 acres in our ordinance. Instead of the 220 feet lot width, I believe it goes down to 150. But it does not change the density. It just means that whatever small lots you have are going to be compensated by others. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did, thank you. I mean, I just wanted to kind of get that out there because it kind of goes to your question, so that's not the expectation with the residential development.
And if I could,
PUD.
I know in the handouts that all of you received copies of, there are several questions about requiring perhaps the developer to do certain things, and it had to do with fences or tree lines. I say this with no regard to any of the specifics about the city of Columbus or certainly this development, but I have worked in this business for 45 years in 40 to 50 different communities, and I can tell you the number one question from the developer is, can you require some of those existing properties to screen some of their things? I know a lot of you that have lived in the community a long time, honestly, understand part of the attraction might be that maybe you can accumulate some possessions and keep them out there a little longer than you should. Some areas look different from others, and I say this not in jest, and I don't mean to discount what's being asked. These homes are all on the basis of the property requirements going to have a more significant investment in the home and the property than most of the existing in this neighborhood. I won't say anywhere in the community, but that's the case. We have questions all the time regarding, is this going to affect my property value? If anything, it's going to increase it. There's no evidence of property values going down. As you know, your community is above average in income and wealth, and part of that is the lot sizes that you have. But in general, we have few regulations for our rural developments. We don't require trees, fences, things of that magnitude. And again, when people come and take permits out, they often ask for a fence so they can screen the neighbor that's already there. And so again, I don't say that with any cruel intentions, but I don't know if there are any other questions on here that I didn't address. I know there were questions about my personal driveway. Is it going to be impacted? This is a road owned by and operated by Anoka County Highway Department. You have to ask questions of them about anything related to the road improvements. This development certainly isn't going to impact anybody's driveway. But if you have questions about timing for improvements or the nature of things, that's Anoka County. There was a question about, can I move the mailbox from one side of the road to the other? As far as I'm concerned, that's between you and the Postal Service. It's not our road. The city would have no say-so in that. You had one other letter that came in, and I believe it was all in regards to the lot averaging concern. We're not putting or cramming more homes in this property than anybody else is entitled to. And there certainly won't be any low-income development opportunities on this property. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Will you just have one other quick comment in regards to the letter that was from 413? Just maybe an update or a date for what Anoka County is planning with Camp 3 and the change, or do we have any of that that's?
You know, I saw some things that said, you know, it was 2025, 26, but I don't have any definitive answers for you as far as the years. I do know during our workshop, Joe McPherson plans to attend on May 9th, so that would be a forum where we can ask him just what is the construction date and timing, because we were awarded grants, and I don't know the construction timing on those dollars.
But I think to the concern that this resident expressed about the traffic on Camp 3, that change will take care of that. I mean, you aren't going to get people coming off of Lake Drive on Camp 3 and crossing Kettle River with that change.
Correct.
So has that been approved yet? This is Rob, by the way.
Well, they got the grant to do it, so it's,
But the council would still have to approve that? I mean,
no, I think didn't we do that with the approval of the grant submission?
because it'd become closing a city road, not a county road.
Right, but that was what I thought we approved when we said go forward with the grant, because that's what was being proposed.
Was that part of that, Elizabeth?
Mr. Mayor and Council, the funding is one piece of it, but the design and closing the road will be a subsequent decision. I imagine the county will want to make sure that there's, if not a joint powers agreement, at least a municipal consent.
Yeah, because I know I had talked to Jerry O'Shea at a career fair, and he said that it'd be up to the city to close that road before that'd move forward with funding, so.
Right, but I just want to say that was the design that they proposed and that we agreed to have them go forward with, so.
Correct.
I have one question. Is that okay? So my question, and this is Sue, it has to do with the finding of fact, and it's number 14 from the original packet on page 28. It's talking about where the wetlands are, and it says that it's on block 1 affecting lots 1 and 2, but when I look at the map, it looks like it's on lots, well, there's one on 5 and 6, but I didn't see on the map where it shows wetland on lot 1 and 2.
If I may, if you're looking at the plat, the preliminary plat drawing itself, right on the common lot line, there's a box, and it's not a square. It says 50.4. That's a setback dimension for a buffer. And so what that, it's not a trapezoid, I can't remember the technical name, the geometry of a parcel that's shaped oddly like that, but that is designating where a wetland is mostly located on the property to the east, but a sliver of it comes onto these two lots. And that 50.4 feet dimension is illustrating a required buffer easement. And so that will be in a final plat, a drainage and utility easement. Down at the southeast corner on lot 6, you can see it. I mean, it even has
Right.
the word wetland.
Right, exactly.
But that other one is located right on that common lot line. It's very hard to see.
Okay. All right, thank you, that helps. And my other question got answered about the legal nonconforming setback, so you answered that on
Okay.
the main.
Anyone else have any questions or?
Somebody, in that, one of those letters that was sent to us, do you have to have the section where the house is on lot number 5? Wasn't that in a letter somewhere? Someone sent that where there's no position of where a house would be, or did I misread that?
I do recall the question, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
In any plat, rarely do we have owners of property identified, and if we did, they would be answering the questions pertaining to where home placement on a particular parcel may be. We do know that the existing owners of the property, the Linds, are staying on Lot 4 in the existing dwellings, but beyond that, whoever buys these properties is going to come in, and they may have to do additional soil borings and provide information on the details, but otherwise, we never know exactly where a home's going. Another question pertained to, will they keep the trees along Kettle River? If I was going to buy a lot, I wouldn't tear those trees down, but I can't answer that question. We don't have a prohibition to that effect, but you know, this is going to be 6 new property owners within this development, and they're each going to be making those individual decisions after they've acquired property.
And in looking at, I know you didn't have the meeting minutes, but if you look at page 2, during the testimony, during the public hearing, and if the circumstances have changed, let me know. But there was testimony indicating that the current owner was going to retain 2 lots, and it was lots 4 and 5. And so my assumption is the reason why there is not a home location is because the current property owner is planning to retain both, and the current home is on lot 4.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? So as far as the Planning Commission, we need a recommendation to recommend to the council approval. Or make a motion? Yeah.
Okay, motion to approve and forward to the city council the preliminary plat application for 15741 Kettle River Boulevard, PID number 15-32-22-43-0001, based on the March 28th, 2023 report by Senior Planner Dean Johnson with findings of facts 1 through 16 and preliminary plat recommendations 1 through 11.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Judy, second. I'll call for the motion then.
Judy, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Barb, aye.
And Lynn, aye. So now we hand it over to the council.
No, one more.
Okay, I've got one more. Motion to approve and forward to the city council the planned unit development CUP application for 15741 Kettle River Boulevard, PID 15-32-22-43-0001, based on the March 28th, 2023 report by Senior Planner Dean Johnson's with finding of fact 1, finding of fact, oh, I just wrote 1 through 20, or 1 through 2. I think it's more than that. 12, okay. I left off a 1. And with PUD, CUP recommendations 1 through 6.
Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Bethany.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Barb, aye.
And Lynn, aye. So now we send it to the council for approval.
Okay, council people, most of us were here. Most of us were here at the previous meeting. We've heard quite a bit of discussion tonight. Are there any other questions or ideas or discussion from anyone?
So Rob here, one thing I just wanted to add is I know as part of our conversation with the Camp 3 thing, I understand we're gonna get the funding, but maybe in the meanwhile, I think it was a little ways out. Anoka County said with this development possibly coming and them obtaining that right away, they were gonna actually be able to possibly clean out more of that brush to improve that sight line to the north. So I would hope that maybe we reach out to Anoka County with that so they can do that extra grubbing to keep that intersection safe in the meanwhile. Just something to bring up from the previous meeting, so.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anything else, anyone? So would someone like to make the motion to approve or deny?
So I can try. So this is Janet. I move to approve the preliminary plat for the Kettle Cove Estates located on 154, oh, thank you. Yay, thanks, I get your crib notes. Preliminary plat application for 15741 Kettle River Boulevard, PID 15-32-22-43-001, based on the March 28th, 2023 report by Senior Planner Dean Johnson with finding of facts 1 through 16 and a preliminary plat recommendations of 1 through 11.
Do we have a second?
This is Sue Alls, oops.
Go ahead, Liz.
Can you include the engineer's report?
Absolutely.
The engineer's report would be March 28th, and items as outlined.
Say that again.
To include the engineer's report with
March
items
28th.
outlined. They're not numbered, they're just bullet pointed, and it's on page 26.
Okay. So I'm going to amend my motion to also include the report from the engineer dated March 28th, 2023, with bullet points as included in our meeting packet.
Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
And then I'll also make a motion to approve and forward to the City Council the Planned Unit Development CUP PUD application for 15741 Kettle River Boulevard, PID 15-32-22-43-0001, based on the March 28th, 2023 report by Senior Planner Dean Johnson with findings of fact, 1 through 12, and PUD CUP recommendations 1 through 6, and also based on the city engineer's report dated March 28th, 2023, with the 5 bullet points.
And do we have a second?
Ron, I'll second it.
Any other questions or discussion? We'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
Mr. Mayor, one question for the applicant. Do you just want to add your suggestion, the letter that you wrote and present to the council, that the letter that you forwarded us today, or do you just want it in the record? So you need to come up to the table. Mr. Mayor, in A4, you have a letter from the applicant dated April 18th. And what I was asking the applicant is if he just wanted to make sure that the council knew the request of the applicant. It's on your page A4. And because it is something new that they have, it's a new request of the applicant, and I just wanted to clarify on the record, it's still subject to all the conditions. They've agreed to all the conditions of the planner's report, the engineer's report. They've seen all of that. This is just something new that we received today.
Do you need an amended motion to include this then as a condition?
We can incorporate it in the development agreement.
Okay, thank you.
And this is only if you accept it. This is a suggestion to the council.
All right, go ahead, man.
Okay, Steve Hirsch, 231 South Shore Drive, Forest Lake, and I'm representing Christine and Bruce Lind, as well as the Newvilles, on the real estate end of this transaction. And just to explain, recently the Linds realized the impact that the 120-foot wide, the newly dedicated additional right-of-way, how that would impact their home, their property, and their privacy, and the separation from the road, And they became somewhat concerned. So we've been talking about this the last number of days, and I've spoken with Logan Kier at the county. Logan's received a copy of this too, and the Linds are perfectly willing to dedicate the additional 27 feet of right-of-way on both sides of Kettle River because they know in the future there will be a need for Kettle River to be widened, to be improved. And they are, again, willing to dedicate that, but they're simply asking that the county not impact or remove any trees or do any excavating in that additional right-of-way until the time comes for the project to be done. So they're asking for the beauty that currently lines Kettle River to not be impacted at this time. So the Linds can enjoy their home, again, their privacy, their separation, and enjoy their property.
Mr. Mayor and Council, that would be an obligation on the county, so the...
Yes.
Right, so what I would suggest is before the plat is finalized and the development agreement is finalized, that the property owner and developer get that commitment in writing from the county, and we'll include that as a factual matter in the record and in the approvals, but it's not a condition that the city would impose. It's an agreement with the county. So we can help memorialize it so it's there in the record, but the developer would need to get that in writing from the county.
Understood.
Yes, we'll do that. I'm Greg Newville, 6843 141st Avenue. And yes, like Steve was saying, she wants to preserve what she can. I really doubt that the county's gonna move forward and take anything out prior to any construction anyway. It wouldn't be any likelihood of that to me, because they would have to set up different budgets, and they would, why would you go ahead and do that until the plant, or until it's approved anyway? But she just wants to get that for comfort as well, and I don't blame her.
So your direction, Counselor, or go ahead, Dean.
If I could just add, we still have to do a final plat for this development before anything gets recorded. And so I think there's an opportunity for the county to respond to the Linds. And if they are uncomfortable with this, it's going to impact the development if the Linds decide they just don't want to do anything. But I just want to make clear, tonight is not your last opportunity to review or discuss this.
And so, Bill, they have to go to the county, get an opinion from them, get it in writing, bring it back, and then you add that to their developers agreement?
We would add it as an exhibit, again, and we would make it clear that the city's not going to enforce that. It's the county that would need to agree to it. But we're happy to make sure it's memorialized, so as time goes on, people understand what the agreement was.
Yes, and again, they're not trying to hold up any type of construction or any type of progress, but just want to hold off until it's actually going to start.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are we hearing from them? Have them come forward and present. Okay, so now we'll move on to number 8, presentation from Fractional Toys, non-binding concept review, pages 31 through 39 in the handout. So if you want to come forward to the table. Make sure you speak into the microphone and give your name and address.
My address or the address of the site?
Your address.
Good evening. My name is Jason Pawelski, 9013 Ashley Terrace, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
Okay. Do you want to give us a presentation of what you're going to do?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to our business and our request for a zoning amendment to operate our RV rental business out of the north end of the Exercise Guys building at 15161 Feller Street. Wanted to start by briefly telling you a little bit about our company. Fractional Toys was established in 2014 by Rick Barstow. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, and we're probably considered the largest RV rental company in the Twin Cities area, potentially a much bigger area, and we hope to continue that path of growth. Our goal is to make it easy and affordable for people to have access to recreational vehicles, mainly campers, motorhomes, boats, snowmobiles, and other off-road vehicles. We have a multi-tiered business in that we offer traditional rentals as well as a unique membership program. You might have heard of Your Boat Club. So they do a rental business in which you can pay monthly or annually and have access to a fleet of boats on different lakes. Our business is a little bit different in that we really want to get people outdoors trying a lot of different activities that they might not otherwise be able to do, largely because of it's a lot of money to own a boat and a camper and snowmobiles, not to mention the storage need. You've probably seen campers on people's driveways and boats that never get moved and snowmobiles that never seem to start when you want to go out riding. We try to make that simple and easy for people to have access to that equipment. And we really appreciate our membership club because it gives us the opportunity to go and buy all these nice shiny vehicles so that they work well for people when they pick them up. We currently have 2 Twin Cities metro locations. Our headquarters is in Oakdale, right off of Highway 694 and 94, next to India Motorcycle and St. Paul Harley-Davidson. And another location that recently moved from Coon Rapids to Rogers, Minnesota, right off of Highways 94 and 101. Our goal is always to make our locations accessible and something that has visibility for people that are passing by. Believe it or not, nobody wants to be inconvenienced anymore having to go down rural roads and get lost trying to find this darn business that they need to go pick up their toy before they head north for the weekend. So having these locations that have visibility and accessibility is very vitally important for us. Recently, we also bought a boat rental company out of Cape Coral, Florida. So our founder spends a lot of time in the winter down there where it's much warmer. And one of the reasons for this is, as you can imagine, we have a very short season. Our boating season is short, camping season is relatively short. Being able to spread our inventory across different locations as we grow really helps strengthen our business model. And so one example of that is instead of shrink wrapping boats and storing them in the back where they're unsightly and people don't want to see them for the winter, we ship them south and they get used all winter long. And so as we grow, we do plan to not have vehicles stored for the winter or off season. We want them to be spread where they can get utilized. We really believe in supporting our community. There's a couple of initiatives I just wanted to mention briefly. So we do focus on buying locally. I just ordered my fleet of snowmobiles for the next season from Olson's. I've never done business with them before, but they're in the Forest Lake area and they were great to work with. And I plan to continue doing that, working with local businesses as I buy vehicles to haul, like trucks, as we buy campers and other equipment. We want to do so locally so that everybody can benefit. We also support our local chambers. We're very involved with the Stillwater and Woodbury chambers. We have a number of vehicles that we provide for medics in inclement weather in case somebody gets ill. We have some off-road vehicles that they can use to get around the event without having to pay for those and have added cost. We provide that at no charge. We also have a program that we've launched called Campers for a Cause. So you might know that there are a number of nonprofits that try to raise money for, it could be for an individual or cancer, injured military, that sort of thing. So we donate a camper rental that somebody can bid on and win. And they usually get $500 to $600 worth of bids. And it's just one of those feel-good things that we can do to be a stronger part of the community and also give access again to our vehicles to people that might not otherwise even think about, hey, I want to take the kids camping for the weekend. And then we also work really closely with first responders. So today I was actually working with a gentleman that is a traveling nurse. And He's in the area from June 15th until October 7th and is looking for housing. So we're working on lining him up with a campground that we work with and getting him a camper so that he can be close enough to the hospital, but also be able to get away. And we do the same thing with COVID. We had Excel Energy rented campers from us and some first responder nurses and doctors that couldn't go home because they not only didn't want to risk getting their family sick, but they can't get sick because they're vital. And so we were able to provide some campers that weren't being used for those individuals. So if you want to look at the first highway frontage view here, granted it's not a beautiful rendering or anything, but I think it serves the simple concept. I just wanted to show on the north end of the Exercise Guys building, that's where we intend to operate our business. It's a small 2,000 square foot showroom where people could come in, secure their rentals, and then go out and get them hooked up and out on the road. Our intention is not to have vehicles littered across the front lot. In fact, we don't want that. We want them protected for security reasons, and we understand that there are concerns with having vehicles out on the lots, and there's plenty of land behind the building for us to operate successfully and be able to keep everything secure. So any screening requirements, signage, anything else that we need to do in order to make sure that we're being a good member of the community in compliance, we're definitely happy to do. On this site overview, it just helps to visualize that there is plenty of room. There's over an acre of land behind the building here on the north side where we would be able to park vehicles out of view that we can stage for people to come pick up, and they're not all across the front of the road posing concerns about being unsightly or disrepair or anything like that. There's definitely plenty of space there. On the property overview slide here, so I just wanted to provide an overview so anybody that might not be familiar with the space behind the exercise building. There's about 2.5 acres on the property, and as I mentioned, about an acre behind the north end of the building. Our neighbors would include Bass Pro and Tracker Boating Center, which is definitely a complementary to our business. Forest Lake Trailer to the south of us, also very complimentary. Whenever anybody picks up a power sports toy from us, they always come with a trailer, and we want them to be modern, in good working order, nothing that's going to end up on the side of the road. So having a partner like that close by is definitely valuable to us. And then I know that there's a private residence behind us, owned by the Wrestlers, and there is a nice tree line back there that would help conceal the view, the sight line from our property to theirs. So as I mentioned, we plan to have all of our vehicles parked behind the building, concealed from the roadway when they're being staged for the next pickup and getting cleaned up and everything like that. The north end of the building where Country Loft Quilts is currently located plans to relocate to the south end of the building where Exercise Guys currently operates. Eventually, the pole building in the back that will initially be occupied by Tim McKenzie to offload the rest of his inventory. We would like to occupy that space as well for storage and service, as well as use existing building mounted signs and the pole sign for displaying our company logo, of course, complying with any requirements for signage. We intend to add an additional entrance on the north end of the building to help with traffic flow. I'm aware that there have been issues with people trying to turn around big trucks in the driveway there and getting stuck. And we definitely want to make it convenient and accessible for people to be able to get through without any trouble, without driving through the grass or anything like that, as well as adding any screenage to the fence line. I know that some of the fencing on that property is in disrepair, and the priority one is definitely getting all that back up because security is important to me, as I'm sure the look of it and security for you and our police officers, nobody wants to have to deal with break-ins and things like that. We want to make sure that it's a nice, secure building with adequate lighting and security. There are a number of property improvements that Tim McKenzie plans to make on this property, including connecting to the city sewer and water, repaving the parking lot once that's done. As you can imagine, that parking lot will get ripped up pretty good trying to access the connections at the back of the building. I know Tim has mentioned that he's planning on replacing the roof this summer, kicking those exercise equipment pieces off the top of the roof, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. And updating the signage, as I previously mentioned, to make sure that it's in compliance and good looking.
Oh, it's for sale.
So this has been a long journey for me. I didn't mention it yet, but it's been about 3 years that we've been looking for property in the Forest Lake area. It's definitely an area that complements our business. I know a lot of people in the area do have recreational toys, but the nice thing about our business is we're not asking people to sell the toys that they use. We're just offering an opportunity to make it affordable and convenient for people to add to what they might need. So you might already have a snowmobile, but you have a friend that wants to go. Now you have an ability to do that. You might already have a cabin and a boat, but now you've got 10 relatives coming in from out of town and you need an additional boat. You might need overflow sleeping accommodations, things like that. So we always say that we're not trying to compete with any dealers in the area. We're going to leverage them, use them to buy our equipment and work together so that if somebody wants to rent before they can buy, they work with us. If they're looking to buy because they're going to use a camper 4 or 5 times a year, they should absolutely buy. So I appreciate the opportunity to present our business to you guys. Thank you so much.
I've got a question. Are you, you got service, are you just servicing your products or are you servicing others?
So mainly servicing our products, but there is always an opportunity to help others in the community as well.
I mean, are you going to open it up, like if somebody has a RV that's smashed up or something?
No, so we offer summerization and winterization services primarily. So as we're doing our own vehicles, we often offer, so like at our Oakdale location, we'll say you can make an appointment, come in, while you wait, we can get you all set and on the road. So by no means would these be vehicles that are lined up waiting for a month for service. We're not looking at doing that. It's just whatever we're doing for our existing fleet. If we can help others in the community who need service quickly, we can offer that service as well.
So you're going to have a mechanic on duty or would it be a mechanic?
Correct.
Okay. and
Correct.
then-
An RV tech.
Are they all pull-behinds or are they motorhomes too?
Both, yep. Yeah,
Both?
we do Class C motorhomes and towable campers.
So you do all the service on your motorhomes, change the
do.
oil and
Yep,
the brake work and all that?
yep,
And
absolutely.
that'll be done in that pole barn?
Hopefully eventually, the height's too low right now, so we do basic outdoor services. So winterizing, summerizing, batteries, my water pump doesn't work, things like that, you can do all that stuff outside, and that's what we do at our Oakdale location.
What, is it going to be advertised as a service department? I mean, like if I had an RV, could I call you up and say I need a water pump changed?
Absolutely,
So you'll advertise that that's
Yes.
what you're doing?
yes.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
This is Barb. I just have a question for Elizabeth. What is this building currently? Does it have a CUP or IUP or, because it's a retail business now, correct?
It is a retail business today, and they do have I believe they do have a conditional use permit today. While the quilt business is a permitted use, and I'm not recollecting, Frank, is this, because it wasn't in the packet, but as far as the conditional use permit, do you remember what the use was? Okay. So at this time, I'm unless Tim remembers exactly what the permit was issued for, I don't recollect that off the top of my head. But this is not an amendment to a CUP. This is a brand new conditional use permit. If you were going to allow the use, the question before you tonight is, as Dean outlined, is all about the use, because the use currently isn't listed in the district. And so you have 4 questions on page 33 that Dean will walk you through. And in this case, you would have to decide and talk about whether you think this is a use that fits in that district, because it's my understanding that Tim will not be operating the exercise business. The other business that will be in that building would be a quilting business, which is a retail business.
And Elizabeth, I do remember now because I just put the file back away. It is Equipment Guys on the CUP.
Okay, so it's for exercise equipment.
It's for what?
It's for, so years ago, when they did conditional use permits, they didn't put a use. They didn't put a use like retail sales. They actually put the business on it. That's why I didn't know what the use was, because sometimes it doesn't always match the list use. And in this case, it was permitted for exercise guys. It was permitted for that particular business.
I have a question for you. I drove by the property and the back isn't paved. Are they planning on paving the entire back?
Not hard paving anytime soon, no. We would do some leveling and fixing the property to make it suitable so that nothing's sinking down, making sure we're in compliance with watershed and things like that.
Okay.
But I know I don't have an intention to pave the entire back lot.
And how many vehicles are you going to park back there?
Say 12 to 20 vehicles
Okay.
in total, so not a lot for what the space is. We have about an acre in Oakdale, and we probably have 50 vehicles parked there, and we would by no means be anywhere near that.
Okay, and the building is currently painted similar to the other buildings in the area. It's a gray, and on your example, you want to paint it white with red?
No, that's just came off of Google.
Okay, so it will stay the color?
It'll stay the color.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I just pulled that off of what I could find on Google Earth, and yep. There's like 3 different renderings based on what year it was.
Okay.
So, yep.
All right, Dean, you're up. Want to walk us through your?
Sure. So on the basis of some previous non-binding review situations that we went through, first and foremost is the compatibility with the zoning district and, of course, the use itself. The very first question, I think it's on the page following in your packet, is the highway commercial district defined? And in it, it says the purpose is to provide retail, entertainment, medical facilities, assisted living, offices, service businesses that serve highway users and the entire regional community, and allow outdoor storage of retail goods, vehicles, and equipment not exceeding 50% of the gross square feet of combined building floor area. So the answer to number one, I can find a place for this business in the purpose of the district. Disregarding how many pieces of recreation equipment or vehicles are actually stored and what percentage of the building space that occupies. I can't make those conclusions at this time, but I think number one is consistent with that. Elizabeth already alluded to the actual use of the property. When this entire freeway corridor was rezoned and the uses reconsidered 2 years ago, basically you put a hold on all recreation, vehicle, trailer, business, whatever uses. They all are legally conforming because they were in existence at the time that the ordinance occurred. There is a drawing that was included, it's an air photo rather, that was included in addition to the PowerPoint. And it's just an illustration of the immediate neighbors to this property, and you can see the equipment, types of recreation vehicles to the north, trailers, utility vehicles to the south, and more utility vehicles to the east. I don't know when that use is ever going to change, but without an ordinance amendment, this use could not proceed. So a basic resolution from this group is any possible direction. that you might want to revisit this notion that you just put the skids on anything to do with trailers anymore in this community, period, or whether there's an opportunity to find an exception for a use. When you look at a drawing like this, you could be talking about a specific area of the community where, my gosh, it's surrounded by these uses. Is that a problem? How do you fix the ordinance to make an accommodation? That clearly is one option. This use is strictly leasing. We're not talking about sales. There's not a display of these uses. If I understand the drawings that were correct in the PowerPoint, all of these vehicles will always be, there's the illustration, behind the building, whether there's 200 or 10. That's the concept. We don't have any details. We're not considering issuing a permit, so we can't get into the details. But if the notion of a particular use like this, which is membership-oriented, but as our former chair managed to get out, this could open up into a service-type business, the repair of other vehicles that are not related to your member community. So a couple of approaches about narrowing down this use. It is leasing, it is member-oriented, and again, I don't think we have the details, but it's a policy direction and decision of the Planning Commission and the council to say, tonight, I don't want to talk about it anymore, we made this decision 2 years ago, or we ought to reconsider this. I mean, those are your options regarding question number 2. Is it, can you adjust the ordinances appropriately and perhaps narrowly to reflect what decisions you started several years ago and what this particular business might change? If the answer is yes, then I think we have to go back and talk directly with the applicant, and the city attorney and I would put our heads together and come up with some form of recommendation which will end up being a zoning ordinance amendment. The extreme opportunity here is to acknowledge what we didn't do 2-3 years ago, that there are some areas unique within the larger highway commercial district that are very specifically all the same use. Is that a sub-district? Is that a new rezoning district within a larger district? I'm not suggesting you go there, but there are other alternatives. The bottom line, though, tonight before you leave is, Jason, thanks, but no thanks, or can we talk about this? And then the details. Again, I think Ron asked earlier, well, who gets all of the storage if we agree that it fits within the parameters that we allow? 15% of the building area can be outside storage. Well, through a planned unit development conditional use permit, you may say, you know, it's all screened, it's all behind the building, we're going to allow 80%. You can modify that standard, which doesn't change the district or your other design requirements. It would be relative to the approval that you chose on this site. So that 50% storage limit as it relates to the amount of building space could be modified through the permit process without changing your ordinance information. But the very basic question is this easily overcomable, or is it time, sorry, we appreciate it, but we're not gonna move on? And I can go through the other two and come back, but I think that's the real death blow. If you have no interest in moving forward, we need to let the applicant know, and we move on and probably don't need to go into much more detail. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to the chair and let you discuss this.
Any discussion after that?
I'll start off, I'll be brave. Having lived through all of those meetings on the highway district or the freeway district and what we had in mind, I don't think, in relation to the RVs, we're trying to avoid what we have today, which is parked RVs all along the freeway, and that does not sound like what you're planning to do. So I personally don't have a problem with something that's RV related, the way that he's described it. I also think that We just went through a similar process on Lake Drive, where kind of right before we were ready to dot the i's and cross the t's, we had the attorney add a rental business, a business that rents equipment to people, because we thought that's a great use. And I think we hadn't thought about that when we did the freeway district, so I think the omission is not intentional. I think we just didn't think about it. And I mean, I personally think it's a great fit for that area, and also something that the community would really, really like.
I obviously haven't been around for all of these discussions that you guys are talking about, but just my impression is that it fits well. I like that you addressed the issue, preemptively addressed the issue of the RVs parked out front. I think it looks like it'll actually probably look just as nice or nicer than what's there right now. And I don't see why it wouldn't make sense, personally.
So I've been around for about 2 years, so I wasn't here when, when you guys were redoing what was, acceptable in that area. I have a problem with just saying yes when it's not there, because, where do you draw the line on other businesses when they come in and it's like, well, you made an exception for them and you wouldn't make an exception for something else. But I do agree that, it's a great business. I like your business model. I think it's really, it just sounds like a really good company. And it does fit with what is there now. You wouldn't be, it's not something, you're not going to impact the rest of the community right there. It's not like we're putting in a big, huge something that's going to be loud and noisy and crashing and everybody's like, no way. That's not the case. It seems like it would be a good fit. It's a good company. If you did have everything parked in the back so we're not seeing everything from the freeway, I know that's a big deal. So I guess I would be okay with making an exception if there's a way to do it where we're not given the message that everybody else can come on in and bring in whatever they want and, set that precedence.
So I did talk to Jason before the meeting, because one of my questions was, when I was looking at the model, in Oakdale, I can see where it's a big business. But here, most of us own our own toys. The snowmobiles go up and down Lake Drive all the time. I own my own side-by-side and four-wheelers, so that type of thing. He explained that it was easy access off the highway for people going up north. I just want to be clear and know everything. Like Ron had to kind of ask and get it out that you're going to offer oil changes. So if there's anything else that you're going to offer, put it out on the table instead of us having to try to figure out what you're doing. So if there's anything besides that retail part.
Definitely not oil changes, by the way.
Okay.
That's for truck companies. That's for our neighbors that are coming in next door.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I just
minor, very minor things.
Right, but it's nice to know everything that is going to be offered instead of finding out afterwards. So
I have a comment only that I agree with Sue and I agree with Janet about it fits in the location, because you got trailers and I think you've got businesses that, how do I want to say it? I don't want to pick on anybody, but are not following the rules. As we had one council member once say, they morph and they get out of control. And I don't think that would happen in your case, because it's pretty black and white. Nothing's going to be in front of it. It's going to be in the back. But if you're looking for a yes, if you think it's in my opinion, I think we can work with this. I guess that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, this is Rob. Talking with you at the Columbus event a little about kind of what your plan was and that. I've had plenty of time to think about it and hearing you kind of bring it forward. I like the idea. I'm for it. I guess I would just like to see something within there that, and you said it, but have something in writing that says that storage needs to be in the rear. You know, maybe make exception for 1 or 2 as you're transitioning those or displaying. I don't know if that's in the ordinance. I didn't have a chance to look if you could display there. I know other businesses are nearby. They're quite heavily displayed. And I think this looks better than, you know, what's right to the north of you, you know, throughout the winter. So I'd be in favor of it.
I don't think you can get a trailer on top of that roof, though.
We can sure try. No, I mean, I think having a display out front for us is definitely a big risk of theft. All of our vehicles are owned either by the company or the individuals that own or work at the company. So I lose sleep at night if I know that I have a $30,000 camper sitting outside that somebody could easily break a lock and be gone in 5 minutes. We definitely want everything fenced in, concealed, good lighting, security cameras.
I just want to throw this out there to you too, with the understanding, and my thought right now is, this isn't one of these, I want to park my 30, just in the daytime while we're open, my 30-foot motorhome out there with a big sign on it that says rent me. It's all going to be in the back. That's the object, and it'll be advertised some other way than the freeway.
Yes, absolutely. We actually, the companies that have big rent me signs on their Class C motorhomes that people are paying $4,000 a week for, that's the opposite of what we try to be. We want you to feel like when you pull up to the campground, you look like an owner and not somebody that rented it. So we don't put rent me stickers on our vehicles, and we don't even put it on in jest or in promotional, just because we don't want people thinking that's something that's going to be on the vehicle when they rent it.
This is Barb. Everybody seems to think it's a good fit, but it doesn't fit the zoning. And I don't want to set precedents. I mean, we've already got other businesses coming in there that I don't feel belong there. And I want to know how you will not set a precedence for this. Because you do fit in the area, but not in that particular area. I know you want to lease because you don't want to build, but it's changing what we decided we want in that area. So, I mean, to me, it doesn't fit.
So, I mean, I can tell you my thoughts on that. I think that as we go through these processes to establish uses and zoning and things like that, I think, you know, it is impossible to think of every single possible use that might happen now or in the future. I think we're pretty good about picking out what we don't want and making that really clear, like what we don't want. And so I think this is, in my opinion, and I certainly respect your opinion too. In my opinion, this wasn't something that we purposely excluded because we didn't want it. For my own self, I mean, I would never have thought about it. And it was only in the discussion that we had on Lake Drive where I thought about that business in Lino Lakes and what a great business that is. And it's like, wow, we don't have anything like that. We should add that. I mean, but it just didn't occur to me during the time we were working on the freeway districts. So to me, those are two really different reasons that you would consider or not consider a simple like text amendment or whatever the process is that will get recommended. And I think that depending on the way you do it and the rationale, you don't need to open up the potential for setting precedent, and I'm sure that we can be advised on how to, you know, avoid that if that's the case. So that's just my thought. I think you know, we were really clear. We don't want any more parked RVs along the freeway. We have plenty of those, and we don't want any more. It doesn't sound like and that's why we didn't include RV sales. So I think that's, you know, that's just something to consider. And I'm sure that Bill and Dean can advise us on the problem with setting precedent, because I agree that is something we have to be very careful about, and we have been really careful about in the past.
I'll address this to Dean and to Bill. So Dean, you said this could be, and Barbie, right, we've set the parameters of what we would like it to be. You said we can make a text amendment that would include this. And of course, this council isn't favorable to text amendments. But if you make the parameters tight enough so that we're not setting a precedent, 15 campers in the back, nothing in front, fence around it, blah, 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 blah. So it's narrowed down so it applies mainly to this business, which I agree with everybody. It kind of fits in there. I mean, there's boats on one side, campers on the other, motorcycles on the roof and whatever. So it's not going to be a big departure from that. But we can control Barb's concern by tailoring it. I'm asking, am I correct in assuming that the city can tailor it tightly enough that we're not, the next guy rolls in with the big camper that says rent me, and he says, well, we did it for him. Well, that's apples and oranges. We have said we will do a rental thing, we will blah, blah, blah. All right.
Oh, does this feel like a hot potato?
No, I just feel like I'm doing all the talking.
Oh, sure.
I just saw a tag, you're it, Bill.
Oh, we don't want to make a mistake either way, saying yes when we shouldn't or saying no when we shouldn't. It seems like it would fit in my mind, and if it gets that stuff off the roof, I'll vote for it. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, I mean, hearing what everybody's saying, generally there's a consensus that this could work, it could fit. So we take that as direction that we need to work on an ordinance that allows it, but under tight, as the mayor said, tight controls. When you amend the code to allow this in this district, it does create a precedent. Somebody else can do the exact same use under the same circumstances. So I think of things like, okay, well, you're looking at reusing an existing building. Is it a reuse kind of thing? Are you starting to think about reuse of some of these properties that already have buildings and have, some improvements? Do you want to have it, so on the Lake Drive example, we provided for a rental business. Okay, so this is rental. We would not have sales. We would not have sales occurring outside. We would not have displays out front. So we'd start to think about those types of conditions. But Commissioner Bobick's absolutely right. It does create a precedent in the sense that someone else under the same circumstances could do a similar business. So that's where you have to think about, okay, do I want this use to proliferate? And if it's a good use and you think it's a fit, then perhaps you do. And I think Dean suggested, maybe because this existing Oxford subdivision, exists today and has so many of these uses, maybe you're thinking about an overlay or a carve-out or some sort of sub-district so that you recognize the existing conditions, but you don't want it to proliferate throughout the highway commercial. So those are just some off-the-top thoughts, and Dean and I, we've done this plenty of times together and in other communities. And sometimes for the proposers, sometimes the best amendment is one that only allows them, but I don't think we can legally do that. So we'll come up with something that's pretty tight, but as much direction as you want to give us, we'll take.
And can I just add one other thing? And this is sort of for the benefit of our newer members. So these concept reviews are non-binding. So by saying, yeah, we'll consider it, we're not saying yes to this business. And certainly there's many, many conditions and things that can be added to the CUP that address some of the concerns that have been brought up here. And obviously the main concern about whether or not we want to reconsider zoning or uses or text amendments or whatever. I mean, we'll have options and pros and cons presented to us, but just so you understand, we're not approving this business tonight. We're just basically giving feedback to the staff and to the applicant about kind of what our appetite for it is.
And Mr. Mayor and Council and Madam Chair and Commissioners, I'm assuming this is an applicant-initiated text amendment. This is not something the city's taking on. It's, this is something where there's a fee paid by the applicant to amend the text. That's typically what happens if you're doing a one-off text amendment. Just for more feedback for the proposer.
I just want to address, Barb, I get setting precedents. It can come back, and I've had it happen, but I think if you do every ordinance, you can get it, you can come up with something. So I think if we have the attorney looking at it and we really dial it in and make it tight, it's not, I don't see a huge repercussion with it later.
I do. Even with Blaine, that doesn't belong there. You're getting more trucks and more vehicles, and that isn't what we were planning. We're being known for that. We're getting them from all over. We're getting them from Blaine, we're getting them from Wyoming, we're getting them from Forest Lake. I don't want any more vehicles. They're all polluters. You got an asphalt plant, you got a cement plant. That's where I come from.
This won't be as bad as either of those.
But it's a start, is what I'm saying.
But then look at the business. The business is people getting off the highway, picking something up and getting back on and going up north to use whatever they rented. This isn't going to be excess traffic on Lake Drive or Kettle River or Potomac or anything like that. This is specific to getting off the highway, picking up your rental and getting back on.
But things do morph. It's like love. I don't know if any of you have gone up there and checked. I do that. I drive around the city. Every time I went up there, no matter what day it is, there's at least 50 trucks parked there. Now, there aren't 50 truck drivers in there at all. So somebody's parking their vehicles and they're leaving them there. And they're not just there for 2 hours, like if you call Love's, they'll say, no, we don't allow anybody to park there. But they are parking there.
Unless they're sleeping in their cab. They have cabins behind the driver's thing that
I
they
know,
sleep in.
I've been there back and forth. I've investigated.
But you wouldn't know that.
And then today, I went there, and guess who's there? Working in the parking lot on a truck. Blaine Brothers, in their little box truck, working on a truck in Love's parking lot. So this is how things morph. You can put anything in writing. We don't have a compliance officer. We've got pontoon boats parked over on where there's supposed to be RVs, and this is my concern. You can say whatever you want, but unless you have somebody driving around looking, you're not going to know that. They're not going to know that. They don't go out there.
But we will have a compliance officer. We're doing our second interview on Monday.
Well, we can tighten it up, and I will be watching because the Wellness Center is right across the highway, so I will be watching.
All right.
I am watching.
Okay, Rob, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I guess I was just gonna say in relation to that Blaine Brothers truck, it was probably just because there was something that was out, they had to limp to that travel center, right, to get there. And it was probably something outside of what, I forget about what their repair is. It's like tire replacement, right? But I do think this does tie in with, utilization of that travel plaza or that travel center. Someone's gonna stop, they're gonna gas up their truck, grab that camper and come back, probably gas up again and head back home, so. It's not that I love Love's Truck Stop, but it's a taxpayer, so.
I got a question. The real issue really is it's a rental place, and it's not allowed there. That's it, right? Whether they're renting dogs or they're renting whatever, furniture, it's just the rental place, right? That's, okay.
Mr., well, with all the formality, I'll just address the question. The use is one thing. There's also limits on the amount of outdoor storage that would have to be taken into account. You put a very strict limit on that. This is one district in the freeway area that allows outdoor storage, but you put a 50% limit based on the building area, so that's a consideration. So it's the use plus, right? It's the use plus outdoor storage and where you store it and whether you have display. So those are all the things that we want to take into account and hear your feedback on. So if we receive an application, which, it seems like it's likely now, if we receive an application for a text amendment, we can tell these folks what ought to be in the text amendment.
So what's the next step, Bill? Does the Planning Commission recommend to proceed, or do they recommend to the council and we recommend to staff to proceed, or?
No, it's non-binding, so there really isn't a decision. I think you've all given your feedback. I think all but one member said it fits, but with tight conditions. So what we're looking for now is, so that's feedback to this gentleman here, the proposed applicant. What we're looking, since we have this forum, if there's anything else that you want to consider, like if you said, no, I want to stick strictly to the 50%, you don't have to make that decision tonight because it's non-binding, but that would be helpful feedback. But I'm hearing that the layout behind the building, that sort of thing, fully screened, works for you. So if there's anything else that you think we ought to hear tonight, great. Otherwise, the feedback's for this gentleman, and away we go.
I got a question. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
There are a lot of facts that are missing to satisfy anybody's direction. And I'll say right now, because I've known Barb since she's been on the Planning Commission, we may not address yours. But I can guarantee you, because neither the city attorney nor I, nor Elizabeth, or all of you like establishing precedents that you don't want to live with. And that's our challenge. I wanted to follow up on these last two issues that were discussion items to make sure that the record is clear. Number 3 is really not applicable. This is an existing building. So this is a discussion item whenever we have a new project. And the last one was Blaine Brothers. And it was, okay, we know coming into it, they might not want to meet the design standards that currently exist in the ordinance. This is a non-issue. It actually is a 100% masonry building. So it isn't creating a complication. The other question, number 4, the outside storage and so forth becomes really a function of the conditions that are placed on this, and that'll set the direction on what a potential future application would include. We've computed the 2 square footages of these buildings, and we'd like to go 60% of that rather than 50%. If they want to live with 50%, then this is just a regular conditional use permit. Otherwise, you may process this in a different fashion, which again keeps it unique, because through that PUD conditional use permit process, you're going to create a unique situation. And all of the things that Bill touched on, it's going to be different from other properties because there's no storefront exposure of this business. It is completely in the rear yard. It is completely screened. I don't know what the rest of those screening components might be, but it will not be the same as any of the other businesses that we talked about, that the first thing you see are pieces of equipment, vehicles, whatever, that become the hallmark of those uses. We also didn't discuss, we're converting a building that was 100% retail into 60 or whatever percent retail. The quilting business is going to expand, must be doing well. I've never been there. I don't know anything about it. But they're going to occupy 6,000 square feet of the building, and then you'll have 2,000 feet of office space, which is an allowable use. So the particular uses fit well within all of the conventional standards that we might have in an ordinance that govern this. The details become the devil in determining things. I want to ask the owner of the building, Mr. McKenzie is here, and I don't want to reveal anything that touches on a personal question that, I'll just cut to the chase. Are you approaching a position where he is going to be the owner applicant, or are we starting out that you are the owner of the property and this is going to be a lease for two separate businesses? Okay. In the beginning, you're probably going to be on that permit until things get established. It helps us figure out, first of all, he may be the applicant from the standpoint of the mechanics. We're going to ask him for his own take on language that might be a text amendment, and then we'll dress that up. All of the conditions are going to pertain to the two businesses you're not running, but you're going to be on the hook as the owner of the building. I want to be clear.
We should probably have him come up to the microphone so we can record this.
Tim McKenzie, for anyone that doesn't know, the guy with the equipment on the roof.
Generally go to a microphone unless they got an eye patch on. Tim McKenzie, Exercise Guys. What could I do for you, sir?
You're just going to confirm now that in the beginning of this project, because this gentleman didn't even know whether he was going to have a project, you're going to remain the owner of the building in the early stages of this process. We may look at a lease that has an option, as was mentioned, but there are just a lot of particulars before we start getting into details on how this may go. But somebody is going to be responsible for the conditions that are placed upon.
I would be more than happy to be responsible for that, because it's my building. So obviously a little off the side here, I kind of helped out a homeless guy last 3 years. And the quilting guy did. We gave him pallets he could sell and scrap metal, because I get scrap stuff. And then when I went out there, did you drive behind it at all? Did you see all that stuff? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I went out there a couple Saturdays ago because there's so much snow. I about fell over. I couldn't even believe it. There was an old camper and a trailer with 35 tires, mattresses. I just spent $3,500 cleaning that up. Well, it's not quite done, but so needless to say, my homeless adventures are over. But no, I'm pretty particular about what goes there. So he's told me what he wants to do. I've checked out his operation. Jim in the quilting place is an exemplary renter, super good. And yeah, if I'm on the conditional use permit, so I would be the guy you'd come after, right? I don't have an issue with that.
We'll make sure we can come after both of you, but.
Well, you'd have to find me.
That's probably why we'll make sure he's on it. But Dean brings up a good point, which is the conditional use permit runs with the property. The owner has to be an applicant in that case. Okay. And so the conditions will run with the site.
And we would be establishing certain conditions up front that are likely to change. As Jason mentioned, he'd like to assume use of the storage building for his own storage of equipment, trailers, whatever, and possibly repair business. Until Tim sells all the rest of his equipment, he's occupying this building, so that activity and the question about members only or people off the street using a service isn't going to be on the table day one. And those are just things we're not even close to resolving. But if the direction of the Planning Commission and the minutes that come out indicate that we're to do our best to make this kind of a seamless transition for a use that's based upon unique characteristics. And again, I think Bill and I will certainly talk about the least complicated route that has the same guarantee to avoid those precedents that you want to avoid. And I'm just assuming it's going to be an acknowledgement of existing uses that are in the area that are legally operating uses. They're going to be surrounded by the things that we were attempting to eventually eliminate. And I know one of Barb's concerns is the more we perpetuate these things, the less likely is that these other uses are going to ever disappear. Quite honestly, given your market conditions, and I talk about this all the time when we're doing ordinance work, these uses aren't going anywhere tonight. It may be 30 years before that transition is complete. It's just something we all have to be aware of.
You won't have to worry about me then. I won't be here.
I intend to be here. You better be here. Somebody's got to keep me in line, Barb. But I think what we would do is proceed as carefully as possible and come up with that recommendation that really reflects all of the concerns that we had, knowing that we're not going to satisfy the ultimate concern that Barb put on the table, but it'll be as good as we can get.
I got a question then.
Ron, can you hold it 1 minute? I see somebody's got their hand up, and it's been up for a while. I just didn't see it. Who wants to talk?
Oh, I think that's her mouse.
Oh?
It's me.
Well, then I need a new prescription. Okay, never mind.
She's waving at us.
All right.
I got a
Jesse, you know those lasers that you use for cats? See what she did to you?
I need one, huh?
I
All
got a
right, sorry.
I got a question for Bill. So say you do a text amendment or whatever on this piece of property, and they say it's going to be leased, and the lease goes 2 or 3 years, they don't like it, and they bomb out of there. Is that property stay that way then, or would the council have to change it? Or does that stay there all the time?
The conditional use permit runs with the land, and so unless we can determine that the use is abandoned, the owner would have the ability to have a similar use come in to that property.
So what's the similar use? The rental? Or
Well, that's to be determined in the text amendment. So therein lies the effort to make it tight and fit the use.
If I could just piggyback, if he's lost this tenant and we've made this tenant so unique that nobody else is going to pick it up, Tim is going to come back here and say, okay, I need to amend the CUP I have because I've got, and he's going to pick another business that's allowed, or he's going to have to go through this again and do a non-binding review.
I'm just going to put a whole bunch more machines on the roof.
Will be the death of him. No, I think the scenario you're asking, fractional toys may be out of business in 5 years. It's Tim's problem at that point, and he's not getting revenue for that portion of the building. It's up to him to come in here and tell us he's got a new tenant, and we need to cross off this RV leasing business, and it's now a knit shop next to the quilt shop. Who knows? We can't predict that.
Okay, I just wondered what happens.
Dog rentals.
Rentals?
Yeah.
Doesn't fit the use.
Dog grooming, dog rentals, rent a dog.
Jason, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So your storage is behind the building, so there's nothing in front and there's no RVs with signs on. How does that part of your business work? Is it all online? Or how do
So about, I'd say 80% of our business comes from Google nowadays. So we do a lot of optimizing for the internet, trade shows, word of mouth. We work with other local businesses and events. So we have a couple of events at Grand Casino Hinckley coming up this year. So we provide campers for talent, medical staff, staff on site, things like that. That's how we primarily promote the business.
So people learn about you through the grapevine or on the Google? Because if all of your property that you're renting out is behind, you're not getting any bang for that buck. Right? That makes sense. Thank you.
And also, can I ask one other question? Just going back to your presentation, I was going to ask this, and then it was so good I forgot. So on the pictures where it says highway frontage view and site overview, there's a few big red X's on things. Does that mean they're going away?
There haven't been sheds there in a number of years, so I just grabbed this photo. I didn't take a fresh photo. It was snowy and icy. It looked horrible. So this is just a prior moment in time, probably 10 plus years ago, when there were the sheds that are on the south side in the photo. And then like that dumpster I know is planned to be moved.
Okay,
to the
so the
other
red
side,
X's
so
mean they won't be in your,
Right.
your real
Means I didn't want
application.
you to focus on it.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
One other question, Jason, from, just out of curiosity, I know it's your intent not to have any campers or equipment on your lot because then you're not renting them. But generally, how many pieces of equipment do you have on the lot at one time? And in the wintertime, you said that it might go to Cape Coral, but is that the norm or the exception?
Right, so in the winter, that's when we'd have the most like campers and motorhomes parked behind the property if they're not going out. During peak season, almost everything should be gone, you know, by Friday afternoon. Some stuff trickles in Monday morning, that sort of thing. And then, like we alluded to, we'd like to get vehicles off-site as much as possible so that they're being rented, whether it's another location of ours or what have you.
So this is Janet. So if somebody goes to your Oakdale store and says, you know, I'm really looking for this type of RV and theirs is rented out, you might take one from here and bring it down there if it wasn't already reserved? Is that what you're saying about
No, different geographies. So
Okay.
getting them out of the snow in the winter to put them somewhere where they can get put to use
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa, so.
So each store has their inventory and that's what they rent. They don't share between stores?
Correct, not
Okay.
really.
Okay.
If I could just follow that line of questioning. There will be seasonal on-site storage. In other words, you're not going to remove all the campers come November, and then there will be nothing but snowmobiles out there.
Correct.
You will have some other vehicles.
Our vehicles.
That get wrapped. They're going to be in the approved storage area, but they will be there simply because the market doesn't exist.
Correct.
But
We don't like-
instead of, as your one drawing showed, 12 RVs or fifth wheels, whatever these are meant to illustrate, it could be 60 snowmobiles within the same footprint of the equipment that's there.
Certainly could be.
All right. So our approach is going to be determining through this actual permitting process what the boundaries of that storage is. And the maximum storage is going to be that boundary. And it might be 60 snowmobiles, and it might be 12 fifth wheels. We don't know. But it's only going to be whatever fits in that area, and that will be a rigid condition of any permit. And then addressing the ownership and future changes, if there is a lease with option to buy at some point in time, Jason's business works, and he wants to take over ownership, one of those amendments will be transferring that permit from one name to another. At that point in time, I mean, at any point in time, as you know, someone can come in and ask for an amendment. But the most likely thing that'll happen in the early years is not a change in the physical conditions that were established. It'll probably be the ownership. Am I getting close?
Possibly.
I know you want to get out.
Oh,
You're not going to give
I don't
anything away. but
necessarily want to sell any property, but
Yep.
if it happens where somebody comes along and says, hey, and throws a bunch of money on me, I might sell it to him. But no, he has that option. But yeah, you're right. So down the road, I think he's going to be really successful. I really do. Because I've looked at the other stuff. I have kind of an eye for business. And so I make it, if he wants to buy the property down the road and he wants to pay me what I want, then he's going to buy it. And then you would have to come back here and get my name off of it because I don't want to be on it anymore.
Any other questions, anyone, at this point? Oh, Elizabeth, your question didn't really get answered.
I'm sorry?
Your question didn't get answered of a number he expected to be stored.
So it'd be based on the square footage. If you've seen our Oakdale location, it's massive and it's too big. This is an owner-operator business, so it would be me, maybe a couple of other employees. We wouldn't meet the conditions of the space that Oakdale takes up because they don't have that requirement. They could fill the whole lot, an acre plus, full of campers. So we
it's
would
to
just
be
be in
determined.
compliance with the 50%.
Determined by square footage by the planner.
We'll have a formula. We'll figure out what's consistent with the ordinance. If that doesn't seem to work, as I say, there's a planned unit development approach. And then to answer Janet's earlier question about, isn't there a trade-off? In this project, you'd say, you know what, we'd like you to really fix that building up. Or you gotta really implement some landscaping. We don't care about the surfacing that's in the rear of the store. That doesn't impact the community, but its appearance does. So there will be a trade-off if they want to take a planned unit development approach. But I think the purpose of non-binding is to have no surprises when you get a permit application in here, that this is, wait a minute. And then Barb will say, I told you so. We just want to follow the right course, come up with the right recommendations. And I know, Jason, when you came in here a month ago,
Otherwise, it won't get
you were hoping to be operable Memorial Weekend. I can tell you that ain't gonna happen. We've got a long road to go. We've got to hold a hearing on an amendment to the ordinance. It can be the same time as an actual conditional use permit application, but that's going to have to be coming from the owner with your assistance. And we will require a minimum of 2 public hearings that can be held the same evening to deal with both a zoning ordinance amendment and the conditional use permit.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just one more thought before we wrap this up. We've all been talking about a conditional use permit. That's a permanent use. It runs with the land. You actually don't have to change the name on the permit because it runs with the land. But if it were an interim use permit,
yes,
you would. So that's always an option. If you're not comfortable with this being a permanent use, then you can grant an interim use. Typically, if it is, if there's financing involved, the banks want to see that it doesn't go away in a couple of years. So, we'd probably be looking at something like a 10-year interim use. But so far, you've been comfortable with a conditional use discussion, so I don't want to, mix the terms. If you're comfortable with a permanent use of this kind, then we'll, that's your direction. But just wanted Elizabeth to ask me about that, and I, we hadn't discussed it. So we thought before we wrap up tonight, we wouldn't want them to go through the whole process thinking it's a permanent use, and then somebody say, well, I'm only comfortable if it's 10 years.
It wouldn't matter to me, I don't believe. Anyone else?
Yeah. Yes, Rob, I just had one last question as a follow-up. As it relates to the repair of, you had said just units that typically you are doing. Would your idea be to be doing that behind the screening or within this
Correct.
barn?
Correct.
Okay, and that with the snowmobiles as well? Okay, thank you.
All right, so there's our answer, I believe. What's the next step? Who calls who?
The landowner and the proposer would meet with staff and submit a series of applications. One would be for a text amendment, and the other would be for a conditional use permit.
All right. Thank you, men.
So where are we at? So right now, we're not, what time kind of frame, once we get that done, what do we have? Any idea?
It's really up to you how quickly you can turn around an application.
You got one on you?
Generally, we can.
Have you got one here?
Yeah. Generally, well, Elizabeth is the expert in that question, but I'll leave it to you.
We have a certain calendar of dates, so it depends on when you have a complete application as soon as to how soon we can have a public hearing. But again, if you come in with a complete application, it will be 45 to 60 days that we will process the permit. Again, if you came in with both the text amendment and the conditional use permit together, we would do them concurrently and have the public hearing at the same night. The upfront time, there's a lot more upfront time than back-end time. What I mean by that is we have a review process and have to send out notices. So the public hearing usually is more towards the end of the 60 days than the beginning. But again, it really is up to you to have, in order to have a complete application, makes it a quickest process. So I know we have a couple of checklists. You can work with Frank and Dean, and they will be able to tell you exactly what you need to submit.
Okay.
So if you've got questions of us, don't hesitate to ask, though. We'll, we don't want you going on in a direction that you don't need to go.
Appreciate that.
We're done?
You done?
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for your time.
Yep. All right, on to number 9, City Council and Planning Commission discussion. Ordinance 2302, Commercial Design Standards, starting on page 44. Dean, would you like?
Waiting for me? All right.
You're ready.
This is Dean. I'll do a quick summary. My very brief memo to you also included basically the same ordinance amendment that was sent out in the first meeting, but there were a couple of additions. We hadn't talked about fences. We hadn't talked about lighting issues. We hadn't talked about amending performance standards for particularly landscaping that may have been approved as a part of a CUP, but then at the time of building permit, for any number of reasons, there are exceptions, and should we allow ourselves the opportunity to do certain things administratively? And I'll walk through these one by one, but that was really the essence of this. I have two things that were pretty clear consensus, and I appreciate that Bill sat in our last meeting on Zoom, and while the rest of us were having fun, he was diligently taking notes and proceeded to send those the same night. And I mean, they were spot on. They matched my own personal notes. And really, it was two things. That we really want to simplify two things, the color scheme and the building materials. And on the building materials, instead of having 3 or 4 categories and percentages, we're just going to say, you know, we have a masonry category. It consists of this, and then there is an other. But by the way, rib steel, corrugated, whatever we want to call it is not permitted as other. It's going to be very basic. I don't have an example of that. I just want to confirm that we reached that direction at that meeting. The other was that we are going to proceed with a very simple concept regarding colors. We'll state something that we're interested in, softer, neutral colors, but we're not going to permit, I have to read them because I can never remember, brilliant, I was going to say loud, but brilliant colors, neon colors, and other distracting colors, and leave it at that. It really makes it easier on all of us not to have this precedent of becoming architects and designers for all of the projects that come into town. We're not very good at that. And as you know, people have their own ideas, and ultimately we waive them based upon whatever reasons they've come up with. We've done this through PUD review. We granted a variance for design standards to Caribou, and I think we're comfortable with those two directions. They were the biggies, and so that's extremely helpful. The unresolved items we touched on at the last meeting, but had no direction. And I'm going to state one, and I'm going to look back to the rest of you, and let's see if we can get on record with these one at a time instead of lumping them together. There was this notion that maybe we look at adding a provision in the ordinance that under the use provisions described accessory drive-through only when associated with a sit-down restaurant. And so that's really question one. If you had a different coffee vendor come in and want a drive-through only, are you in a position that that's what you want to do? You want to deny it by creating some other language in here. One of the things we might not have talked about, but in my neighborhood, there is now Taco Bell, which no longer is doing seating. McDonald's has this concept, and they are now purely drive-through. The city of Minneapolis, which has decided that they are not an auto-oriented but a bicycle-oriented, would not go this direction. They don't want to rely on cars, and so they don't want drive-through businesses. But the basic question is, do you want to simply deny other drive-up businesses because you really want a sit-down restaurant? And I can just tell you from my experience, and Bill would echo the same, if you're not in a market that gives you easy access to getting what you want, namely a nice sit-down restaurant, you're not going to get it by imposing standards, but you will deny other things, like other drive-up businesses. So that's the basic question. I'll turn it back, and you can direct everyone to give their 2 cents.
I'll start, I guess. I have no problem with the drive-through. And perhaps if the whole Caribou thing sort of came about because they kind of changed their plan on us too quickly, I guess we could have told them, no, we only want your Caribou if it's going to have tables and chairs in it. But we still have a nice business. It's not as huge a building, but there's cars there all the time doing it. And if people have finally realized that that's how they make the most money is by having limited staff and limited seating, I have no problem with either way, but who's next?
This is Janet, I'll go next. I think what you said, Dean, is really important, so I'm going to say it again, or at least my understanding is that by saying no to drive-throughs, we're not likely to get or promote sit-down only, we just wouldn't get the drive-throughs. And the sit-down only is going to come to us if that's what the market will bear. So with that in mind, I think, I mean, of course, I would rather have a sit-down restaurant than a drive-through, but if right now or in the future, what the market bears is drive-through, and it's a nice building and it doesn't distract or create problems for the neighborhood that it's going to be in, I don't have a problem with the drive-through only. I wouldn't say no drive-through.
And I would agree with that, and I do think that the trend is really going to drive-throughs. And we can fight that, or we can go with it, for all the reasons that Dean already stated.
So I'm going to look at it from the angle of we don't have, I mean, where would we put, where is this restaurant going? Because really, right now, the only sit-down restaurant we have in Columbus is Running Aces. We do have a drive-through in Hardee's. We do have a drive-through in Caribou. And I think if you're looking at the freeway corridor, we need another sit-down restaurant. And we got to deal with it now instead of in the future, because you can put up a drive-through restaurant there. And then really, do you have any more place for a restaurant to go in Columbus? Nobody's going to want to, you know, go next up by Waldock's or a restaurant anyway. So be specific where you, if you're looking at the freeway corridor, I think we need another sit down versus a drive-through.
Okay, but that goes back to Dean's statement by saying no. Doesn't mean you're going to get a sit-down, you're just not for sure going to get a drive-through. Right? If somebody comes in next Wednesday and says they want to put a restaurant, we're all for it. But if they don't and somebody says they want to put in a drive-through Taco Bell, it's something.
Lynn, are you saying just because there's limited space, so like if a drive-through comes sooner and then it takes up the space that a future sit-down restaurant may have eventually occupied? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying, if you're going to go for a sit-down restaurant with your parking regulations, how much parking they have to have, how big the building is, if a drive-through came through and took up too much of the space where now you can't fit a sit-down. And so that's just, that's just where I come from. I like to support my community, and the only place we have is Running Aces. We do have Hardee's and Godfather's Pizza now, but you know what? We go to the tavern. That's our go-to because we can go and we can sit down and we can have a nice meal. So I'm just saying, let's look at, before we're so quick to say drive-through, because you can get a Taco Bell and then you can get a Burger King and then your land is all gone and you will not get another sit-down restaurant. So think about what we really want at this point. And I want sit-down. Just for the record.
So I just wanted to agree with Dean that we're not saying no sit-down restaurants. We just don't want to eliminate drive-through only. And I was never for that, of eliminating drive-through only, because I think it's the wave of the future also. And if we did that, I think we'd be creating more instances where companies would come in and want it, and we'd have to, oh gosh, now we need to do an amendment or something to accept it. What if that's the only place that comes? And if it's not our property, we don't really have a say of who's going to come in. I mean, if it's private property, we can't dictate who they're going to sell to. So I just think being more flexible will help all of us. And what else was I going to say? I forgot. But
Well,
that's
and
the
I
gist of it.
get it, flexibility, but just look at Forest Lake. The sit-down restaurants are increasing. Your Kentucky Fried Chicken, which had a drive-through, just went under. So I'm not going to agree that drive-through is a wave of the future, because if you just go over to Forest Lake, the drive-throughs are closing, and there's more sit-down restaurants going up, like Mallard's and the Lone Oak and Fireside. So keep that in mind, because
Yeah, and I did remember what I was going to say, and I do. So this wouldn't affect that, because if that's the way the market is going, it doesn't matter what we have. I mean, if the market is going towards sit-down restaurants, yay, that's what we want. But having that eliminated isn't going to matter one way or another. It's only going to hinder us, I think. And I remember the other thing I was going to say, because we've talked a lot about being proactive versus reactive on what we want here. And we've just always kind of gone towards reactive. And I mean, unless you want to go out and find a developer and get some land and find a sit-down restaurant company that's going to come in and put one up, we just have to sit and wait for one.
I have a question. How much undeveloped land is, because I'm new here, I don't really have a frame of reference, and I looked a little bit at the maps and things, but I'm just curious, like, how much is there to be developed still that we want to develop? Is there like if there's a lot, then there's room for every drive-through and sit down, and if there's not, then that's different.
I'd say we have a lot. I don't want to change course, but I want to add one other component. A factor that was included in the unresolved list was coming up with minimum building area as well. And it's probably helpful to discuss it in this context, because if that was another method of preventing drive-through only businesses, then you may not want to impose a minimum building size. If the reason for that had nothing to do with drive-through only, I'm not aware of how it came up, or what previous discussions there may have been, but they might be tied together. In other words, I think the shock, I was not in on the very first meeting when Caribou came to the community. Elizabeth sent me the set of plans. I looked at it. I said, 670 square feet? She went nuts, because in that meeting, she assumed, whether she was told, I can't verify, but she assumed it was what you were seeing all around as a nice Caribou that might have had 12, 15, 18 tables, whatever. We had no provision that prevented us from proceeding with the review. And so if part of this is we just don't want that to ever happen again, two ways to do it will be that you got to have sit down and you ought to have 3,000 square feet. But both of those factors may be the death blow of other businesses. I can't tell you, I never checked, what the square footage of the Taco Bell is in my neighborhood that is purely drive-through. It's certainly over 670 square feet. I'm guessing it might be in the 2,000, 2,500, maybe 3,000. So both of those line items that were left unresolved are things that you might want to consider together. The other thing, and Bill and Elizabeth and I were involved 15 years ago when the city made the decision to buy the interchange and hired the Twin Cities' best retail analyst to help us decide what we're doing. And in part, the initial recommendations that came out was to have almost a third of our freeway corridor set aside for retail entertainment type purposes. His second go around 8 years later cut that down to about 50 acres. Yeah. And so one of the things that we have to acknowledge in your community, whether you like it or not, is that you have many, you have one of the busiest highway corridors in the region. It's a launch point to the Great Northwoods. It's not where Toby's is at, where somebody that came up from Iowa is, gosh, it's lunchtime, let's pull over, and Toby's has been there forever, even though it's kind of going downhill if you've been there lately. There's the Village Inn, and I'm trying to think of the other places that are on the way up north. They're not right here on the edge of the freeway. Mm-hmm. People are blowing through the freeway, and they're going to the Hardee's and the other places at the truck stops. It's quick in, quick out. You have no rooftops in this community that are like Forest Lake that will support a nice sit-down restaurant. They have to rely on business that isn't strictly highway oriented. And so I just feel compelled to share that in your thought process, because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot making the wrong decision. It would be wonderful to have another restaurant. That's a tough business to be in. And they do seem to be coming back. But in our community, we don't have walk and don't walk yet. We're trying desperately to get something that resembles that. In the meantime, your immediate market may be limited to a number of those fast food operations that include some sit-down opportunities, but they're not going to satisfy a dining place that I know we all want, other than the one you have. That's your market. And so in part of the design of your ordinance requirements, you can't ignore facts. And I think we learned, I don't want to say the hard way, but coming up with color-coded requirements and so on, what did we do? We amended them every project that came in here because we might have just been a little off. It doesn't disregard the intent and the purpose and the walk and don't walk that you wanted. That was how this all came about. But if we don't meet other criteria for people that are spending the money to make these investments, then are we shooting ourselves in the foot? That's all I want to say.
So I just had something to kind of build off Lynn's, and we were talking earlier, right? Earlier on years ago, right? When we first started talking about this area. And we wanted what's a downtown, a place to gather, a community. We're a community-based area. I don't foresee Taco Bells and Burger Kings and McDonald's. I said, I don't foresee that, right? We're gonna put an apartment building there. These people are gonna walk to somewhere they can go sit down, they can utilize our sidewalks, right? They're not going to walk to Taco Bell. Maybe they will, but they're not going to do that all the time. They want somewhere they can go have a drink, somewhere they can sit down. I mean, me personally, I'd love to see a sit-down restaurant in Columbus. I think we need it. I think it's long overdue, right? I think there's availability to put a drive-through with it. You look like a Keys Cafe. Through COVID, I was going through the drive-through and picking up takeout food from there all the time. So there's that availability. You can get coffee there. You could grab a cake or whatever it is, a pie. So I think we got to be open-minded to that. You know, you think of Love's Truck Stop, Cracker Barrel, that's a travel type stop, right? They might be interested. I just don't know that it's been marketed fully to them type of developments, right? So I guess, you know, you look at Running Aces Play and Stay. You're to come and stay and go eat at Hardee's? No. There's not a restaurant in Running Aces right now. They got to have a place to go sit down. So that's my take on it.
This is Barb. On that same note, I don't know if you've been through any of these drive-through McDonald's, Taco Bell. Their prices are getting ridiculous. I don't even go to them anymore because you can't get a meal for under $10. You can go sit at Perkins and get a meal for less than $10. And the food isn't even good for you. So I don't know if the drive-throughs are really going to make it because they have to pay their people more. And like I say, what you get for your money is very poor. And as far as the coffee shop, I was told that Columbus's share is $3,000 a year. Well, that's nothing. Do you want more businesses like that that are taking up land to get $3,000 more?
You're talking about property taxes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just, we were trying
I
to.
thought you were talking about like income off taxes from
No,
sales tax. I'm
property
like,
tax
that's
for the
it?
city.
Let's pay a
I mean,
day.
that's nothing. That doesn't, I mean, it's nothing. So you want all of these drive-throughs because they're the vogue now. You know, that's no reason to make that your goal. And I just can't see that that's what we want in Columbus. We're still a small community compared to these others. And it would, sometimes you just have to be patient. That's my opinion.
So I wanted to answer your question where we came up with the size. I mean, what we were trying to accomplish was land utilization. So the idea of not sticking a little 600 square foot building on a 30-acre lot. So so we talked about like what would be a minimum size that would make sense. So I think that was the premise behind that minimum size, not about trying to screen out drive-throughs or anything like that. But I think there's a couple things too I just want to speak to. I do think that there's plans for sit-down restaurants. I mean, plans like as in way up here. We had a presentation by Running Aces, 9 months ago or so. They talked about what their expansion plans would be. A restaurant was part of that, at least one restaurant, a real restaurant with sit-down. So, I mean, I think that there are people who have their sights set on that. I think there's another landowner that's also looking at hopefully bringing in a restaurant more geared towards the highway, like the Cracker Barrel style, but I think there's that too. So I don't think it's all necessarily like we'll never get a restaurant, but to Dean's point, I think it has to be fit to the geography and the population, which he's correct. I mean, our biggest asset is the freeway and the drive and the traffic that goes through or by us. And that's going to be drive-through. That's really what's going to happen. So I think just to remind people that there are people working on plans to bring in a sit-down restaurant. I think that's exciting.
Just a quick comment. You know, you're still in a unique position in that the city owns some pretty important freeway land.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the Planning Commission, the council can, and the EDA can say, you know, we're going to keep at least one pad, whether it's, you know, waiting for the right restaurant or whatever use. You know, if there's something to the point that we can wait for it,
Mm-hmm.
it's the city's land. And, you know, you've been lucky to sell enough land that you're not kind of behind, on payments.
Mhm.
So you're sitting in a position that you can make that choice to sit and wait for the right user, at least on one or two of those paths.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah, I got a statement real quick. Two comments I want to make. Number one, Colonel Sanders left Forest Lake because they built a new store in North Branch. That is a leased piece of property there. And they had Craves looking at it, and they had a lot of people looking at it. But that developer said it's a touchy business out there. The other day, a couple Fridays ago, you go by the log cabin, there's a sign there, we're closed tonight because we don't have help. You look at Pizza Pub out there. Why is that taking so long? There's a lot of reasons. There's not a lot of workers around here. And so when you get a sit down, the same thing up at the Village. I've been up there before where we're not doing that tonight because we don't have enough help. So I gather, and my second point is, if you get a chance to go down Main Street or 14 through Blaine, and you get past 65 there, and you go to the southwest corner right there, you could fit in this room. They got a Popeyes, they got a Starbucks, they got, what's the other one? They got 3 or 4 restaurants that could sit in this room, drive-throughs. I mean, the buildings are just enough to put a stove in, and they're long. But they utilize that whole little section there. So I think that's, in fact, the owner of the Colonel Sanders once told me when Arby's came in, and I forget Arby's, there's another restaurant on Broadway there. He said, I welcome those because they bring me business. When people pull off the freeway, they maybe don't like Colonel Sanders, but they may like McDonald's, or they may like Arby's, or they may like Taco Bell. They'll walk, but it brings them in, and that's what they're looking for. So I think you got to keep it open mind.
I just don't want to see drive-through only. That's I'd like to make it where you say Toby's is gone by the wayside. Maybe their restaurant has, but people get off the highway to go and get their bakery items. So it would be similar to Keys, but they still if they're traveling and we're trying to get the people off the highway, you have to have a bathroom and you have to have something for them to take with. They don't just go through a drive-through when they get off if they're heading north. They're stopping for a reason, and so they're not going to just go to a drive-through only. They're going to go to then they're going to go to the gas station and go, I might as well just get everything I want right here. I just don't want to see drive-through only. If it was a Keys is busy all the time, even their drive-through. So I'd like us to have something that we want people to see our community and not just get off and drive through and go.
Something else to think about too is, we're how close to Forest Lake? We share the same zip code. Someone punches in fast food. Everything's already in Forest Lake. Anything you could ever think of except Hardee's, and we got that now. Hardee's is a hot ticket item, right? And I don't eat fast food, but I like Hardee's once in a while. We all wanted a Chipotle. People at Forest Lake lobbied for a Chipotle. We got that now, so what's there to go there, right? I mean, stone's throw, you're in Forest Lake and everything's there, right off the highway.
Do you remember when Taco John's came in Forest Lake the first time?
Yeah.
It came in on a flatbed trailer, and they took it off and set it on the ground on Lake Street and put a drive-through in.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe times are going back around.
As they always do.
You're talking up by Kodiak Coffee there?
Huh?
Wasn't it up by Kodiak Coffee there?
Yeah, it was there.
I think one other thing I just want to quickly say is, with the Caribou Coffee, it's a little 600 or whatever, between 600 and 700 square feet. It's only sitting on 3/4 of an acre of land. Again, I mean, if someone's going to put in a drive-through, they're not going to buy 20 acres to stick it on. I mean, that would be crazy, right? So I think when you're thinking about, we've only got so much land and we don't want to miss an opportunity by filling it up with drive-throughs, I don't think they're very land intensive, because why would they be? They don't need it. They just need enough, they need access, they need enough for stacking up to get through the drive-through, and then off they go. So it's just another thought. And I think that, you know, there's benefit, just like you said, with the Forest Lake. You pull off the freeway, and yeah, maybe you like this fast food, or you like that fast food, you like this coffee or that coffee, maybe you really do want to go sit down. And, you know, the more of those kinds of things that are clustered together, the more you're going to get people off the freeway. But I don't think saying no to a drive-through only is, I just don't think it's the right thing, because I think that there's room for both.
I would like to go back to Bill's idea. Or maybe we're arguing about nothing. The city hardly has any land left in that 4 quadrants. So you've got the piece up on the hill. You've got 8 or 10 acres over on the northeast quad. The other side is already sold. We sold it to Love's, whatever the piece they needed. And we have sold on the southwest side everything. So we're only quibbling about 8 acres or 10 acres of property. So I like your idea, Bill, I think, of why not, I think we should allow drive-through only, but then why not designate a piece of that little 8-acre piece up by the northeast quad? That would be a building pad, 1 acre or 2 acres or something. And if somebody wants to come in and build a
Olive Garden.
100,000 square foot shopping mall, we could change it at that time, correct? And that would give us best of both worlds. If somebody wants to come in and put up a drive-through, I don't care what it is. If they want to come up and put in a supper club, I don't care what it is. We have something for everybody, but we don't even have that much property left. I mean, so anyway, what does everybody think of that?
I have one quick question, kind of related to that. So if would this apply to the area over where Running Aces just purchased their property? Is what we're talking about, would that cover that area also?
I believe it would, right?
All right, well, Running Aces is zoned harness racing.
Yeah, they
right?
have
Oh,
their
they
own
have their
zoning.
own, okay.
zoning, so
Surrounding it, it's either community commercial, highway commercial, or general commercial.
But that property that they just purchased from the city, it hasn't been rezoned. It's retail.
Yeah,
And so the
Okay.
answer is yes.
Because, well, I was just thinking, I mean, that's a lot of property, and what if they decided that they wanted to do a restaurant and drive-throughs? And would that eliminate, if we did put in no drive-throughs, would that eliminate their potential of doing both? I mean, they have a lot of property that could do both.
I think the question on the table is not whether you're getting rid of any drive-through. It is, will you only allow drive-through as an accessory use to sit down? That's the question on the table.
Right,
And
but
I think we would be looking at whichever districts have that included in them, and I think it's 3. They would all reflect whatever decision you make.
okay.
Said another way, we'll never do another Caribou Cabin.
Right.
which, by the way, they did, so when they presented, they said they had a lodge, a chalet, and a cabin. And it was never discussed that they were putting up a cabin. At the time, they said they were no longer doing the lodges because they were too big, but they, you know what I mean, they were looking at a chalet. And then when the plans came in, it was a cabin, and I was like, where did this come from? And Ben's like, well, that's what's here. And it was a surprise to me, because we had talked about all 3 models, and they never said, oh, and this is the one we're going to build here. So it wasn't until the plans came in for the conditional use permit that at least I knew that it was going to be a drive-through only. So be careful, I suppose, when, hindsight for me. Now I ask those questions.
Well, we never knew there was such a thing as a chalet or a cabin.
They were just rolling them out, and
Yeah.
we were pretty early in the list. But
We're
it also
ahead of-
goes to the point, and again, this is probably more an EDA discussion, but, you know, lessons learned, when we're selling city land, you can get what you want, you know, even if you have to hold out for it.
And when we did that Caribou, that was originally part of a master plan with Ebert to do the apartment
Correct.
plus the accessory of the coffee, right? And then
Right.
we turned them down because they wanted the hookups and everything thrown in. And then they retained that one parcel. Wasn't that kind of how it went?
Yep.
Yeah. You know, with putting that there, I do think it's a good addition to Columbus, right? I was for it. But the added traffic that brought as far as, you know, possible accidents, I mean, on that corner, we have that pole taken out on a regular basis, or a couple light poles there.
That pole's been taken out before Caribou was ever
Yeah,
there.
no, right. Oh, I'm just saying, but
Many
we added
times.
additional drive-throughs where you're pumping that amount of people through there.
But I think that's how that area was designed. It was designed, I mean, that design was with the idea of what Hy-Vee needed, so we had turn lanes and directional signals. I mean, it was really meant to handle that kind of thing, but anyway, did you get your question answered about drive-through only? Dean?
Did what?
Did you get your question answered about drive-through only?
Oh, absolutely. It's
Okay.
clear as mud.
Because it's like
So-
almost 8:30, so let's go on to our other questions.
You have some options.
Yep.
You do nothing, and then you will entertain, because once somebody has an application, if the ordinance allows it, we have to process it. So that's an option which has that risk. You can change it and simply say, we're going to associate this with sit-down only, and then that will eliminate any other drive-through. So that's really the bottom line. You want to vote? You want to go up or down, yea or nay?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm not saying I'm not ready. No drive-through. I mean, a keys would be great.
No, Lynn, the question is drive-through only.
Yeah.
That's the question, drive-through only. So one of the chairs can call for a thumbs up, thumbs down.
We always going to
And
start,
I'll go out on the limb and be the only one. That's okay, because that's just.
there, we got one over there.
There's three. Come on.
All right, so what are we voting on?
Are we voting on the deal about drive-through
drive-through.
only?
Well, let's say, do you support drive-through the way it is now, that you would have a drive-through without sit-down? Do
I have
you
a-
support that?
I have a really quick
You
question about
said
how it
no,
works.
No. Pardon?
Is it like, this is maybe a dumb question, sorry if it is it like if somebody comes and has a thing and there's nothing that's against it, they're like, here, we want to do this thing, and there's nothing written that's against it, you don't have to say yes, though still, right?
Yes, you do.
You do. So if somebody wants to do
it's
something and
not
there's
for-
nothing that's written against it, then you do have to let them do it.
That's exactly what happened.
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So the issue again is, without naming names, somebody else with no sit-down capacity wanted to do a drive-through. It's currently allowed. Do you wish to eliminate that by requiring access or accessory use only to sit-down?
Would they have to buy the land from the city? How does that work?
I think Bill's point is, you're a major landholder. You could always reserve one or more lots.
Okay.
For a sit-down. I can tell you, no matter
Yeah,
what,
Can I just say, Dean, forget about that comment, because that's more of an EDA issue. For the planning commission, the question is simply, would you want to repeat what happened, you know, in the northeast quadrant, which was a drive-through only? And if the answer is no, 1, 2, 3, then that's direction.
And is that just for planning commission, or is that for council too? Are you?
Well, it's a joint meeting, so
Okay.
both sides can provide both bodies can provide.
You want a roll
let's just
call
start
then?
and go in order, and
Yes,
So, I mean, I guess where are we talking?
just in general.
Freeway corridor.
In the three.
In the freeway corridor.
Yeah, in the
So
I
we're-
mean, because if it's by Caribou, you already have drive-through only, so go for it. But if it's another corner that there's nothing on, and you're just gonna start developing that, then
I think that side of the road's bought up
But they're-
too, if the apartment goes, you know.
It's the same district.
But, so you've got commercial retail districts in and around the interchange. And so you're deciding that essentially for wherever it's allowed,
well, there's only one corner that really is.
but you can't zone corner by corner. No.
Yeah, but that, I mean, you got Holiday, and there's really nothing else that can go there.
You got the whole property east of
Yeah, there's a,
the racetrack.
yeah, there's a fair amount of acreage there.
Doggy Paws, the other building, they can all convert, plus you got 1 or 2 vacant lots.
Yeah, 3 acres of vacant.
Along Lake Drive, I can't think of the guy's name that had the business we didn't like.
On Lake Drive?
Huh?
On Lake Drive? You're talking about J Brothers?
On Lake Drive, that had the temporary.
J Brothers, the old J Brothers.
Yes, the old J Brothers property. There's another parcel next to that.
Yep.
There's actually a lot of land. I mean, a sit-down restaurant can fit on an acre and a half.
Yep.
You got a lot of options. On the northeast quadrant, you could have 10 sit-down restaurants on the property we still own. The issue is gonna be the market. No matter what we do, it isn't gonna bring a sit-down restaurant. That has nothing to do with it. But you can prevent a drive-through only. That's the question. Ron, do you wish to prevent drive-through only?
That's a tough question, and I don't know why they always start with me.
They didn't, you got 3 others who weighed in.
But I don't like to put a requirement, I don't think, I think it should be open for everybody. That's what I'm saying. That,
Keep it as is.
keep it as is.
I'm against drive-through only.
Okay? Mayor?
I'm in favor of it.
I'm in favor of it.
No. Keep it as is.
No drive-through
3
only.
to 3,
No drive-through only.
3 to 4,
Keep it as is.
4 to 4.
Keep it as is.
Wow, this is a
Close
close
one.
call.
Yeah.
So, do we want to bury this one?
Please. We can go on to the next.
Because you only have 6
So-
more.
Janet wants to go home.
So officially,
My dogs are at home going like this.
if we make no change, then you're going to conceivably have another one.
But it'll be 3,000 square feet, right?
That's the second question. Let's go around that. Do you want to have a minimum building 3,000 feet?
Does it start at 3?
Yeah,
Starts at per acre.
that's the minimum
Per acre.
anywhere in the commercial district.
Yeah, yep.
Yep.
Yes.
They would have.
Oh, wow, wait.
Can you
In
scale it, so if you have
in
a
your
half an
many
acre, you have
years, Dean,
1,500?
are
And
we
if you have a
shooting
quarter acre,
ourselves in
okay.
the foot or not?
The legal basis, I don't think Bill's going to have a problem with this.
that would open up.
This is a very standard residential criteria.
Yep.
9,000 or 900 or 1,500 or whatever is the minimum square footage of a single-family home. It's not unheard of in business. We've not had that. And Elizabeth would support this. Whatever you calculated
Okay.
was your 700 square feet.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just in keeping things in perspective, 3,000 square feet is huge for a drive-through only.
Yeah.
Huge.
But they wouldn't own a whole acre, right?
Huh?
They wouldn't own a whole acre. So it's
Does it
per acre,
matter
so it would
who's-
scale.
I would never build a 3,000 square foot building to have drive-through only.
Right. And
So we would be eliminating drive-throughs.
But it's per acre, so if they're on a half acre, then it would only have to be 1,500 square feet.
If they were on a quarter of an acre.
And Caribou's on 3/4 of an acre, so they wouldn't meet it,
Less than
but,
7.
yeah,
But they would have had to only size up a very small amount, and believe me, now they're gonna need it.
yep.
I mean, 672, that's teeny.
But we'll have to make
But
that
I'm pretty
clear
sure
in the
they've got that
ordinance,
all
that it's
figured out.
proportional, because
Yeah, and that was our intent, I mean, that was the reason for that size, is because we
Well,
didn't,
then, Bill, what can the city do if somebody comes in and says, my plans are for 2,800 square feet, not 3,000, and we think it's a sit-down supper club with cocktails?
PUD application.
So you can work around that.
you've already done that.
And
So-
so to Bill's point, if your half acre minimum is, the standard, we would say it's got to be 10% of the minimum lot size or a factor like that. And that'd give you 2,600 feet or whatever the number is, a half acre.
So we can work around it. We're not eliminating options. Okay,
You want a standard that gets a little larger building than what
yep,
the other one put in. And if that is what dictates the removal, or somebody decides they're not going to do a drive-through because of that standard, I'm not seeing anybody being heartbroken.
Right.
So we may come up with a standard that's like 15% of the lot area has to be the building.
Minimum lot, but scaled.
So instead, it wouldn't be if we can come up with 3,000, but that might have to be 15% of the land area is represented in the building.
And I think that was actually what we were shooting for the first time. We just didn't know how to get there, and we plopped in 3,000 as sort of a starting point. So I think what you're suggesting is what we were originally trying to accomplish with that 3,000 square feet, was to have there be some sort of ratio of building size to lot size that made sense.
So this is an easy one. Let's call for the vote. Ron?
Where are we?
Start over on the other?
Well, I think, I like Judy when you brought that up. But, so now we're talking about 15% or something?
Of the parcel. So if you had a half-acre
Yeah.
parcel, that would give you the 3,000. That's your minimum standard. That, I think, is what we would try to accomplish. As Elizabeth said, if it's a 3/4 acre that they ended up buying, then it would be more than 3,000 square feet. They'd have to do maybe 3,700 square feet. And they would have never done it without a PUD application.
But,
No, they would have built a chalet then.
Yeah.
Which would not be close to.
or they would have went away because we didn't have enough,
I've never
you
been
know.
in a caribou that big.
Yeah, so, but, I mean, you're not, can we talk about it just more in general terms? Like, you're gonna come back to us with a ratio building size to lot that we can consider, rather than saying 3,000 or so much per half acre? I mean, I think that would be an easier thing to vote on than some arbitrary number.
I think you can just tell us that you want a minimum building area, and we can come up with it.
That's what I would like to
I
say.
think that's what Lionel told them, because when they told us that, not 2 weeks later, the drive-through chalet went up right next to the McDonald's on 14. So them telling me that they didn't do that anymore was not true.
So,
Because they just went on the very next exit and built the same exact, what we wanted, which was the chalet drive-through.
And you're not over it.
And I'm not over it.
And neither is Barb, and neither is Barb.
Because he told me that they weren't building them anymore, and then I actually called him back, and I said, you did not tell me the truth, and he admitted it. So, because it's one thing to tell me that you're not doing it, and it's not in your market, but then I go driving in the next community, and I see you're building it. So, they weren't exactly telling us apples to apples.
I'll tell you another thing. After that was all done and they got their variance and they got their building permit, Daddy Warbucks, who was going to actually own the property and lease back to Caribou, was in a quandary about what a future use would be if the lease terminated. I said, man, that's your problem. 600 square feet doesn't get you much.
so that's leased
Well,
property?
Can we expand the business? I said, well, if you meet setbacks and you meet parking, maybe you can triple the size of the building, but those are the factors. So once you look at a size of property like a 3/4 acre parcel, and I think we would specify that's net land.
It could be a Dairy Queen,
We would
Dean.
exemplify that. Or storm ponds. So it's a function of that. For somebody to reuse a building, you can't have 600 feet, I'm sorry. You're gonna have a blue elephant, not a white elephant.
We got a yes, Dean.
So how much impermeable surface can they have? If they've got a 600 square, they've got 3/4 of an acre? I mean, that has to factor in there too.
We generally set the standard of lot coverage, if that's your question, impervious.
Of
50%.
50%.
But that gets waived if there are regional ponds available, or they demonstrate that they can exceed that 50% lot coverage. But generally, what we see as the majority of impervious surface is driveways and parking, not buildings.
Right, but if you've got a drive-through, I mean, they've got a lot of
There's a lot of
asphalt.
Yeah, they do. It's it's regional ponding there, so they were able to maximize the use of that lot because it was regional ponding, and they did put double lanes, you know what I mean, for the drive-through.
So we left drive-through as is for the time being?
No, we only did one vote of
Now
yes.
we're gonna go 15%?
No, we only did one vote of yes
Ron
for
is the only
the
one that counts.
ratio thing, so let's just finish that vote.
So, to be clear on that, right? 3,000 per acre, if it's a half acre.
No,
it'd be
no, we're giving up on the number.
Oh,
We're
we
good-
are?
We're saying, do we want them to come back with, a ratio building size to acreage that we can then vote on, right?
Right.
Minimum
No,
building
You're
size.
simply asking, do you want a minimum building size?
Yes,
Yep.
yes,
Okay.
We'll
we'll
establish
come
that
up with that.
criteria.
yes. So
Okay, I'll
don't,
go first.
look at that brave man. That was a yes?
Yes, that's yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Are you a yes?
Eyes all around.
Yes.
Yes, yes. We're over to Judy, aren't we?
I don't know.
I know.
Only get one vote.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Maybe you could do a smiley face.
Emojis, yeah.
Okay,
Make the next question as simple.
we're moving on. Well, this came up at the last meeting. Are your percentages of masonry that vary in the different districts necessarily the standard you want? And specifically, in the mixed-use, high-density, in the community commercial, you have an 80% standard. That just means 80% of that entire building is a masonry product. 70% is the standard in the mixed-use medium, general commercial and highway commercial, 50% general business, 30% I left off.
Light industrial.
Light industrial. And so, again, it's a pure policy question. I think what some of you brought up, Rob, it might have been a statement you made at that last meeting on design standards. You were looking at this products and other things, and when you see the extent of what composite materials make up in the marketplace today, are your initial impressions of what you wanted 100% right here? It's walk and don't walk. And then we degraded as we got further from the interchange. Are those really where you wanted to be? Makes zero difference to me. I'm not gonna direct you one way or another. So you can leave them as is, or you can say, why, are those really important? Do we really want to demand that much masonry versus the other, particularly if you get rid of your horrible ribbed steel anywhere in the district? That's up to you. But that question came up and it's unresolved. Do you want to revisit it? You can cop out and say, not tonight.
I'll start.
Oh, good.
Because I want to be done. I don't want this, I don't like this, the percentages that are as is. I don't know what the percentages should be, but I think we need to be more flexible because there are more materials out there that are beautiful and durable, and I don't want to be stuck in this masonry business. So I would expect you guys to come back with wording that would fit that concern, and I don't know what that wording is.
You had a lengthy, and I think the version of the draft ordinance that was included in here had class 1, class 2, class 3. I hope you're not going in that direction.
No, I'm not. Nope,
Because
absolutely
that
not.
was still heavily
Yep.
weighted.
No.
Class 1
No, I don't
is-
want to dictate to that extent. I really like better saying this is what we don't want and we'll consider anything else. Unless there's some, unless there's some reason that you don't want it because it's going to fall down in 3 years or it's dangerous or, whatever. Because I don't know when you say masonry, I mean, we got into like, what is masonry? Is hardy board masonry? In my mind it is, in some people's mind it isn't. So then it's like, I don't want to get into that debate again.
Yeah, I think we can make clear that the composite materials are not masonry.
Yeah, but then if you have an 80% masonry only, then you can't consider the composite materials, and that's my problem.
So can I just chime in? At the last meeting, which I did attend remotely, I heard over and over to simplify. And so having a simple 50% standard, which I think is in Dean's notes, is headed in that direction, other than LI, which would potentially be 30%. I mean, what does that feel like in terms of the suggestion, getting to the point that you're making? Is that something that we can poll the bodies on?
Yeah, I think what I'm reacting to is what's written here, which is the 80%, 70%, 50%, 30%. There's a whole bunch of percentages here, depending on what district you're in, and it feels arbitrary to me, especially when there's really good other materials out there that are durable and attractive and all those other things.
I don't think that that's the, I think that the, if mason, 100% masonry is what it was and you want to walk away from that is, I think what you want to say is, if you want other materials, people could be very creative with all the composite materials. If you don't want metal, in other words, because that's what they'll pick every time. If you, and that's what Dean said, that, you know, if you eliminate the ridged metal, if you say that it's going to be 80% other materials, the other 20% is going to be metal. It'll be some sort of metal. That's the cheapest, you know what I mean, building product. So if you have composites for all the rest, I think that more of the question is, how much metal do you want in your districts? Because that will be the other component, because it's the cheapest building you can buy.
Metal other than the corrugated ribbed that we've already said we're not going to have that.
You're allowing metal panels. And
Yep.
so again, if you're saying somebody come in with your own designer and give us a mix of hardy board and flat metal panels, we're okay with that. But half of it's got to be masonry, and that doesn't include hardy board or LP. Those are the other, and we'll make that clear. And if they want stucco, it's not panelized stucco, it's masonry stucco.
And
we'll
I'm
make
just-
those clarifications.
But why would we say it has to be half masonry? Or pick a number. I mean, why call out one particular building material and say it has to be half this? That's what I'm struggling with, because like, I get it if it was because that's what really good, strong buildings are made out of, and that's what you need to do, but I'm hearing from the expert over here saying, no, that's not the case anymore.
It's,
And-
yeah, that brick or that exterior, it's really not structural. It's mechanically fastened to the framing material.
So
of
if you're
building.
getting something that is structurally sound, is durable, has curb appeal, and it's made out of something other than masonry, why would we say no to that? That's my point. I like better saying no to the things that we know we don't want. We know we don't want corrugated metal. Maybe we,
The genesis of that is, and it's probably the ship has sailed or the market has changed, the materials have changed, is that masonry construction was generally stronger. It was fireproof or, you know, more fireproof, and it cost more, so you had more expensive and more valuable buildings. But with the range of materials, and we do have an expert in the room, with the range of materials, you make a good point. You know, as long as you specify a certain quality of materials and you prohibit, more importantly, you prohibit what you don't want.
Right.
I think you can get there. But there,
Don't want pole barns like most of Lake.
No.
right, and that already is
Your
taken
ribbed
off.
tin.
Yep, that's already taken off the board, but I don't know my building materials well enough to say what it should be.
It's not taken off, it's not, pole construction is not taken off because you can cover it with veneer and you can cover it with all sorts of different things. So it's really what the design in the exterior would be, because that's the design, that's the design part.
And this is actually a good point, Elizabeth, because when I hear pole buildings, I think of what pole buildings usually are sided with, which is corrugated metal. And I don't know if that's what you're talking about, is you don't want pole buildings, but when I say I don't want pole buildings, that's what I'm saying. I don't want something that looks like you should have a horse in it.
Well, that's what most of the buildings on Lake Drive are.
Right, and that's already taken care of here, is that we wouldn't have it, but I think what I'm hearing is pole buildings means the construction, not what you're sticking on the outside. So, I don't know, I'm still sticking with, if it's durable and safe and high quality, then I don't really feel the need to put a specification. I like saying that we are not going to let ribbed, corrugated, or standing seam, and if there's other recommendations you would make about, don't let it be more than 10% metal panels, I'd be willing to, but I like the talk about what you don't want and keep an open mind about everything else, because it's changing constantly, and with the exception of Rob, none of us know this stuff very well to keep up with what's going on in the market.
Something I would say on the metal panel thing, and it's under number 1 in the list here, right, under exterior metals, we have listed clarified ribbed or corrugated. So those are your barn type metals, right? Standing seam, I feel like we should accept that. If you look at the roof of Caribou, that's standing seam. And that's used in a lot of different, you know, as they break up buildings, they'll use that on the wall panels, and it is a very attractive look. But I would have to agree with everybody, the ribbed and the corrugated, right? Like you would see on a Lester building or, one of these buildings along Lake Drive. I don't think that appeals to what me personally I'm looking for and kind of the census I've gained from everyone else, but
Could
what's
go a
the
whole
thought on
different
the
direction
standing
and
seam?
simply say you encourage a mix of materials and come up with a minimum percentage of different categories. And probably for the reasons that you've discussed in the past, nobody seems to object to too much stone, brick, whatever, even though it's being done less. But if that is a minimum percentage, then you're not going to get somebody that comes in with all LP siding, especially on a commercial project. It's one of a handful, particularly in the residential market. It's a big material. It's not that big in commercial projects, but it's a component, and I think you do have to regulate it. You don't want to see a bunch of commercial buildings going up with lap siding. It'll end up having the same appearance as the rib steel. And so maybe what you do is take a look at these categories, and maybe you want a maximum of whatever percent of the lap siding, because that is, in my estimation, has become the new cheap appearance of buildings. LP and Hardy products are just very popular. They're well-constructed. They have good warranties. It's just a few of you saw bad examples of poor workmanship, labor going up, and you can't overcome that no matter what product. But you could take the opposite approach and say no more than 20% composite wood or concrete products, no more than whatever. And it ends up doing the same thing. So you have to be specific. Do you not want to have a masonry standard at all, or do you just want to lower it? Because I think Bill had a great idea in the beginning. Why don't you put them all at 50%, and then you don't have these different standards other than your
Reading your memo.
your light industrial. Did I say that?
That was your second sentence in the memo. There was debate at the last meeting to perhaps.
Yeah, I wasn't promoting. I was
Could
just saying.
you say it as a mix of materials to include masonry at X amount %, right? Not a,
What happens
I don't know,
if
you look at a normal building, usually every building's got 4 or 5 feet up, stacked up. Make that a minimum, right? And that's due to rain coming off the roof splashing. A brick material is not gonna rot away versus a Hardy or an LP, right? Exposed to water for a long-term period. So that's typically why they do that.
And why you see EFS, is on the top of the building, not the bottom,
Correct.
right?
In
Did
in
that
my 20
apartment
years,
building-
I've torn a lot of EFS off buildings because of rot, because it leaked. So it's not a very good product.
Did we make the apartment building there, was that 80% concrete?
We were messing around with making and put it in the front that way. I mean, we had a different expectation for what the front would be versus the other side, so that we were trying to make it work, but yeah.
But that was 80% concrete, the apartment building,
Masonry, not concrete.
masonry.
I don't think,
I think we had 30%.
yeah, I was just gonna
Was
say,
the standard at the time. But there was more in the front because we let them not put it in
That's
the
right.
back,
That's
which
right.
faced the DNR property.
But to the point, right, so that's a good example. If you didn't have that higher standard, you couldn't negotiate down,
Right.
because they would have they would have said, other than the fact that you own the property, but.
Dean, with your suggestion on the mixed products, then what do you do with somebody who wants to do tip-ups? Because that's not a mixed product. Tip-up panels, that's all concrete. So then,
You have permission to go 100% tip-up in your existing standards. What you objected to before were plain panels. I noticed a brand-new building going up at 169 and 610, and they were not raked panels. I forget your terminology. Precast textured concrete panels, okay? They had at least 5 different textures, but they were all smooth panels. They weren't raked. And that's, To me, that just wasn't an issue to get that nitpicky, but smooth panels, if you got the whole building and it's painted white, you all freaked out. That's what caused the alarm and the change. If they'd had a earth tone, tan, raked concrete building, nobody would have said boo about Bear Home.
Well, we said boo because they changed it without coming back and amending their
We
IC.
made them go through a process.
Yep. Oh, believe me, I know that because I got to be the person on the other side of the table with them, so I get that.
Yeah. It's, again, there are a lot of things that the decision to go tip-up panels is going to be based upon ceiling height as much as anything else. As Rob says, if you had a multi-story building, you're going to go with lighter panels to the top.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the heavy stuff is on the bottom, or you got,
Right, and I'm not bringing it up because I don't want tip-up panels. I just, when we were saying it has to be a minimum of, or mixed materials, if you have a building that's going up that's tip-up, it's not mixed materials, which I'm okay, I'm okay with tip-up panels. But if I understood your suggestion, it would eliminate tip-up panels because they wouldn't have a mix of materials.
well, I think if the wording is that you're still going to end up with a minimum of X percent, or maybe you focus on what Rob said, if it's a one-story, 10-foot ceiling commercial building, it's 1/3 of the wall is masonry. They're going to pick the bottom. They all do. It's all wainscot because it sits on the top block of the base course of the foundation. They can go all the way up, but you can go with a percentage of the building facade. You can go with a percentage of materials, but I would not say they can't have, if they want one product, it's masonry. And that'll be your tip-up panels. You'd have to word it in that fashion. You may, from an appearance standpoint, in the pictures that were reviewed at the last meeting, I don't know if any of you thought any of those EFS buildings were ones you wouldn't accept. And so this is where you get complicated.
Sorry, I'm just, due to the hour, I was trying to see if we could get some direction because we know that you want to simplify. I think that was at the last meeting.
Yep.
We know that what you don't want, you've outlined what you don't want. So the question, it may not be answered tonight, is are there things that you want to promote such that we should put a percentage in here? And that's, for instance, Dean said, not more than 20% of metal panels, because you don't want too much metal panels. Those are the things that we need to put in the ordinance if there's consensus here.
I would do better if you guys came back with some suggestions that we could say yes or no to, because I don't know this topic well enough to land on anything specific about percentages. I mean, I agree.
I was gonna say, I just don't know enough about it and how the market's changed. I agree. If you could, if it's possible for you to come with suggestions.
I mean, maybe, Rob, you can give some suggestions based on what you think is happening in the construction.
So, yeah, kind of what I was thinking is, can we set this one aside, or is this something we're trying to get done tonight? And maybe I could, in my day-to-day, I'm doing this anyways, I could take pictures of some buildings and what they look like and bring that back, like several different buildings.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Kind of similar to what Dean already did, I guess, but.
Could you send it to them so they have something to work from?
Well, I think we could do both. I mean, to move this along, we could both take the pictures and we could try and condense this ordinance. I mean, I think we've got some ideas
Yeah,
here.
and simplify is exactly what the goal would be. I mean, that's my goal. And I'm not against 100% tip-up panels, just for the record, if it looks nice.
Yeah, I agree.
I frankly liked your one line.
I know.
Because it's simple. It's 50% of a certain set of materials and the rest you have flexibility on.
But you know, the problem, the concern, I should say, with something like that is on small buildings, like when we talked to Caribou and we were saying, nope, we're gonna hold you to the masonry thing, and they showed us a picture of 100% brick, it looked like an outhouse that you used to see in state parks. And it's like, no, I don't think we want that either. I mean, it met what we said.
But you have your flexibility device, you used it in that case.
Yeah,
And, you know,
well,
it gives you the lever that you want to ensure quality. You know, because there's a minimum of something, minimum 50% of this class of materials, and the rest is negotiable. And it's a simple standard.
Yeah, the rest is negotiable. It's not, which is what we want. It's not up to them, you know, put 4 feet of brick, and 4 feet of
If
plastic.
they come in with a compliant building,
Yep.
then it isn't negotiable.
but what you said now is different than saying 50% masonry. You said a class of, so if you said classes masonry, it's tip-ups, it's whatever, I mean,
Yeah.
then that, I'd be, yeah, that's fine.
I mean, the one thing that I like about the way this was drafted, in, you know, keeping in mind that we want to condense it, is that you had a class of materials that set kind of a bullseye on, these are quality materials. We'll get some advice on what those quality materials are that should be kind of minimum construction. And then the rest is, you know, knock yourself out, you
Yep.
know? And by having that 50% of a class of materials that you think is quality, then you're not giving away the store.
Yep, but not have the 3 classes that none of us like. So yes, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, a base class
Yep.
of, you know, it has to be
Of
minimum.
quality materials.
Lot of cities like to see a lot of glazing, they like to see a lot of windows, you know, so windows are something they say often when they're negotiating, put more windows in. Elizabeth got a beautiful Love's facade, and I'm not really sure how you did that, but I was over there today gassing up, and it's practically all brick, right? I mean, brick isn't cheap, is it?
No.
And I think there was just one meeting, we were sitting back there, and the you guys said, it's not gonna be this.
I will say what looks like brick on the Speedco is actually just hardy panels screwed over corrugated metal.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I have pictures I shared with Elizabeth, so if you wanna,
Well, they did a good job of,
yeah, I think it's because they got caught on it, right? And
Well,
then they had to scan it.
They did that on the tire building.
Yeah,
I think the
correct.
other building is there is a lot of true masonry.
Actual
in that one.
masonry, yeah,
yeah.
yep.
Looks-
All right, Dean, what's the next one?
Okay,
9 o'clock.
so
Why not 2 nights in a row?
we're getting closer. You had a question about eliminating corrugated metal as fencing material. I have no problem with that. I think you want to put corrugated plastic as well. I mean, those panels are just as common as metal. So I'm just going to put yes. And there's more than one place that we would have to do this. There's a couple of screening areas. Alterations for fencing and screening plans be allowed administratively after a CUP is approved.
Bless you.
I have no problem with that. It would simplify Elizabeth's life. I think instead of going into Section 800 of the ordinance, we go to the duties of the administrator and put in there that authority. This kind of information isn't necessary for the public or the applicant. It is an opportunity if somebody comes back at building permit time and you see that they've done whatever, as long as they haven't minimized a particular screening effort where the minutes show it was all pine trees and now they want to have serviceberry. You know, you're not going to allow that. We'd come up with the language, but I think we put that as the duties of administrator. Okay. Yes, in that one.
We're seeing head nodding there.
Yep. Proposed lighting provisions, there was an example of that. It was adding that you would permit only a half lumen at the property line or foot candle at the property line on residential. It left the standard for commercial property at 1 foot candle at the property line, and it added a statement about permitting in any district coach lights. That's the easiest way to reference them, like a porch light that any of us might have. We allowed that in our coffee shop, and so that is a necessary addition. There was a reference to the maximum lumens are 40. That would be like a half-watt light bulb. So we'll come up with a standard that would be more like 75 watt or 100 watt. But it just means somebody in a commercial use, as long as it's not a spotlight, can have an unshrouded lamp. Okay. And then finally, the same thing for previous discussion about fencing or screening plans. Landscape plan changes as long as they meet the intent of the ordinance. I think we put both references in the duties of the zoning administrator. Were there specifics in the languages that were presented earlier that you want to see, Elizabeth?
Nope. It was just as long as it met the code that they can change it. As long as it met the code, they can change it out.
And so again, we want to be careful that it meets, it's consistent with the intent of the approved action. And in this case, we're just going to call it out. All of these get approved by CUP. Those are the only ones where somebody would come in with a change in a landscape plan. I mean, they're all businesses. And so we give that authority to the administrator. All right, that one's yes. There, was that quick enough for you? We saved the easy ones for last.
I'm just channeling your decision makers.
Okay.
All right.
I know what we're doing, and we are going to come back. Rob's going to show some pictures, but if by default we'll use some percentage.
Yeah, I just think, that, you know, we could look at expanding the list of class 1, and then just say you got to have 50% class 1, and the rest is
Other.
other, yeah.
And the only exception would be if you don't want more than 25% lap siding or whatever.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. I know.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you. So now we're moving on quickly to Planning Commissioner's report. Oops, nope, sorry.
Nope.
9A.
I was packing up.
City engineer to the Rice Creek Watershed District letter, Anoka County ditch 102232, and that's on page A5.
So I'll do this. Is that what you want? Okay. So it's the Bolton and Mank letter that is on the back side of the preliminary plat Kettle Cove Estate thing about the working with the county. I think I talked a little bit about this, so I'll be really quick. There's been lots of discussion about this ditch 1022. It's a county ditch 32. It starts right around the border of the Waldock Estates, sort of in that area, and it runs down to Marchand Lake. And it is over 100 years old, and it is, you know, it was put there to drain water. And there's been discussions with property owners over the years that for various reasons, it isn't doing what it needs to do, and they're getting flooded. And there's also, there were concerns that, you know, the development that went in that extended Jodrell Street and created that development there also kind of interfered with the conveyance of water of that ditch for reasons that, because the culverts weren't set at the right level or they weren't the right size or whatever. Anyways, there's been lots of speculation about why we have experienced flooding problems in that area, and Rice Creek is looking into all of the concerns and all of the speculations as to the cause for those concerns, and they are having a meeting on April 26th, which we've been part of, and they asked that the city state its position on this discussion, and we spent a lot of time looking at you know, records and plats and engineer reports, various different engineering reports, and, you know, complaints to the city and all those sorts of things. And based on all of that, Kevin drafted this memo, which I think is a very good statement of our position. We are not the water experts. We are not in a position to tell the watershed district how to engineer ditches or things like that. But we do want them to do it in a way that does not take away our upland or create flooding problems for our residents or things like that. So the intent tonight is for you to say you're comfortable or not comfortable with this memo. The intent I would like to meet is to send this to Nick Tomsek tomorrow, that they can include it in their packet. And then Kevin and Tim Olson from Bolton and Mink will be at the meeting on the 26th. I'll be at the meeting. I think, Sue, you plan to go too? A number of us plan to go. Jesse plans to go. I think you posted it. Did you post it?
That's what I just wrote. I'm going to.
Yeah, so, I mean, anybody can go to it, but I think this is really good because this has been a problem for years. What the real problem is, or if it's a combination of problems, is still to be determined, and the action that the watershed is going to take is still to be determined. They had a draft memo that they're going to be discussing. There were 5 potential solutions, and that's what's going to happen on the 26th. So what I'd be looking for tonight is for the council to accept or approve this memo, and then once that, or make changes to it, and then once that's done, then we can send it to Nick tomorrow morning. Did I do that?
Do you need a motion, Elizabeth? I'll make a motion.
What, do you have questions?
Yeah, sorry to drag it out. I just have a quick question. So did something similar to this, like my grandpa, Rice Creek runs through my grandpa's property, right through it, and they came through and cleaned the ditches out? Was something similar like this had to happen previous to that?
They have cleaned that ditch. They have replaced culverts. There's some, I don't want to say disagreement, debates about whether or not they cleaned it and maintained the original slope that it was designed to have, and whether or not the culverts are placed at the right elevation, and all
Sure.
that is part of what's going to get discussed on the 26th.
Okay, and
But
this is in a certain area or the whole Rice Creek itself?
This really just, it's not Rice Creek, it's this ditch.
Oh, okay.
And it's the part of the ditch that runs through Columbus. It obviously runs through Lino Lakes too, but you know, we don't get to say what
Yeah.
happens there. So really what we're doing is we're saying, hey, Rice Creek, we appreciate what you do. From a city's perspective, you know, we're supportive of maintenance and improvement, as long as it doesn't take away Highland and as long as it doesn't flood our residents. And that's pretty much what this says.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Then I'll make the motion to direct staff to direct Bolton and Mink to send this off to the Rice Creek watershed.
And I'll second it.
And it's seconded. Now, are there any more questions? I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
And Elizabeth, do you want to send this to Nick, or do you want me to? Either way's fine.
Well, the problem right now is it's not signed yet, so I think we just need to, we need to ask Kevin to sign it and then just have his office send it to Nick.
Okay. Do you want me to email him and ask? I can send him an email tonight and ask him to do that.
So if you want to do, because I think we're trying to hit it, I think we're trying to hit a deadline, right?
Yes, they said 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Also, just by way of a note, we'll also be at that same meeting asking them to set aside our wetland credits.
And just for your information, I was at an informational meeting that they had kind of specific to this overall question about ditch maintenance and stuff. And it was really, really informative. I learned a lot. But they talked about the wetland credits that they created by doing the Browns Preserve and how many are left. So since that pertains to yours, they said they got 60 wetland credits, and they have only used 20.
So we're asking for too few.
Well, I don't know if they have other, I don't know if they have other mechanisms for reserving them, but I was like, yay, that's the information we were looking for, so just so you know.
Good.
That was part of their presentation.
All right.
Okay, on to number 10, it's the Planning Commissioner's report. Does anybody have anything?
This is Barb. I went through Iverson this weekend, and that problem property is getting much worse. Just so you know, the entire yard was full of vehicles.
So can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Actually,
notice that?
you brought it up in it, and what I remember was that this went through the criminal courts. There was a bench warrant issued, and then then my mind goes blank about what happens after that. Like a bench warrant means that they can't just go and arrest them, but if they stop them for another reason, they can, or what do we do now that there's a bench warrant out, but it's still not, like, nothing's happening?
Getting worse.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I recall, and this we should probably update with Joe Murphy, but the part of the problem was the courts during COVID were not taking on zoning matters. So there was a second piece that was going through the courts.
This is the second piece, and so it did go through the courts, there was a ruling, and I think he didn't show up or whatever. He didn't show up, and so they issued a bench warrant, and then, then we stopped, because it's like, now what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, so that's one piece of it, right? There's a consequence, but we should talk to Joe Murphy about where that stands and get a report back to the council.
Okay.
Yeah, Barb, and to your point, through the summer, he had a dog living in the truck, and he'd just leave the truck window open, and that dog wasn't allowed inside the house. It slept inside the truck all the time.
So if you see something like that, if you call the Humane Society, they have investigators that will come and look at that. That's the right, or you could even call our animal
I
control
know.
person. I mean, that's the right action to take on something like that. That might be a, animal cruelty case or.
Yeah, but there is more vehicles back, and obviously it isn't fun, it's your neighbor, right? But he also does not own the house, the guy living there, so.
I think his mom does, doesn't he?
Yeah, she does not live there, I believe, so he's just renting.
Well, anyways, so you'll do that, Elizabeth? Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, Barb. I'm glad you're driving around. Do you want to be our compliance? We have an open position.
Free. I just care about the community, guys, that's all.
I like that you are keeping your eyes open.
Was my job for 40 years, looking
And
for problems.
obviously you did it well.
I'd like to see
Number-
Barb in a little uniform going around enforcing stuff.
She would be a force to be reckoned with, let me
A
say.
little red bulb for the top of my little red car.
Number 11 is Associate Planner's Report.
Beautiful.
All right. And so I'll make the motion to adjourn our meeting tonight. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Lynn, aye.
Janet, I.
Barb, aye.
Sue, I.
Rob, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Judy, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Our meeting is adjourned.